Okay, so let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. It is 9:02. Would you please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And if I may ask if everyone could remain standing. This week, we lost someone from the county family, an elected official, Constable White, who was killed in the line of duty. And if we could all take a moment of silence and please reflect on his service and his life. Thank you very much. His funeral services are today at 10 p.m. I know there are some members who will do our best to get through the important parts of the agenda for those who would like to attend his funeral services. First, let's start off with the Executive Director's report.
Good morning, Michael Lena with the Paso MPO. I have 3 items to talk about today. I guess Mr. Miranda, go ahead.
To the chair, I think we have a new addition to the TPB board. If you want to
That's correct. I don't believe we received the resolution officially from the City of El Paso, which is typically the norm. But if it is okay with the TPB board, that Mr. Marquez join the TPB. If there's no objections, is it any objections to that? If you become a member of the TPB board without receiving the official resolution? If not, welcome to the TPB board.
Again, good morning, Michael Lena with the El Paso MPO. There's 3 items that I'd like to pass along to the policy board. The first one is the potential of having an amendment to our current planning documents to include the Horizon 2040 MTP. And so here there's a potential for 3 projects that are identified: the I-10 at Mesa Park project, the FM 1110, which is a Clinton Road project, and also the East Lake Boulevard project. If it is discovered that we do need to make an amendment either to all or to any of these projects to come into the planning documents, is that it would potentially require a conformity determination and a 30-day public comment period. In the event that one of these or any of them are defined as being operational, then that would change the determination of what we need to do. But certainly, as soon as we have information from our federal and state partners, we will let the policy board know. The other component is that we had received information from the planning offices of the Federal Highway and the Federal Transit Administrations on planning emphasis areas. So I believe in April, there was a discussion by me to the policy board, and of course over the last several months. One of the things that we have to identify and bring into our working plans was the coordination between MPOs and other transportation providers. So I'm happy to let you know that the Mesilla Valley Policy Committee unanimously approved the memorandum of agreement between the MPOs. It's in your packet. And so the attempt here is for you all to review it and then bring it back for action in December. So if there's any questions about this. The last item is training and workshop opportunities. I believe about 2 months ago, I had sent an email to board members on information on specific training. And so what we're doing from a regional perspective to include our neighbor up to the north in Las Cruces is that in January, we hope to have a joint El Paso and Mesilla Valley MPO-led training session. Understanding that this board is also made up of New Mexico representatives, we felt that it was important to foster that coordination with Mesilla Valley as well. So the first training will be the MPO planning, roles and responsibilities, and then the second component to that would be transportation funding. And then from there, we'll work with our state and federal partners to see if other trainings that were mentioned that are a little bit more specialized, so we can invite you all for those trainings. if anybody has any other questions or comments.
Could you provide me a copy of that? It's not in the backup. So would you provide me a copy of that?
Yes, ma'am. This wasn't part of it? Okay, I sure will. Is there any other questions or comments?
Nope. Any questions or comments? Okay, thank you. We'll proceed very quickly with public comment. We have a few folks signed up just to speak on general matters and a few to speak on some specific matters. The first is Mr. Mike Rooney.
Can I go last, please?
Yes, sir. We have Mr. Miguel Juarez.
Mr. Chair, if I could just ask is that, I think somebody might have called in. There was an expectation that the Federal Highway Administration was calling in.
Okay.
So I don't know if she's called in.
I'm here, Mike.
Oh, okay.
For everybody's information, that's Genevieve Bells from the Federal Highway Administration.
Okay. Welcome.
Is she here for a specific item, Mr. Medina?
She wanted to hear the discussion on 3 elements that deal with the office lease, the TFAC restructuring, and the TAPCO.
Okay, all right, so she'll be here for more to the discussion.
Yes, ma'am, that's
Thank
my
you.
understanding.
Thank you.
Mr. Juarez.
Okay.
Mr. Juarez.
No. Good morning, Mayor Leeser, mayors, city council members, Judge Escobar and Commissioner Perez, city manager and MPO members. My name is Miguel Juarez. I'm a member of the Lincoln Park Conservation Committee that also acts as a neighborhood association for the Lincoln Park community. I would like to read some comments I made at the Texas Transportation Committee last Thursday. Some of you were there, but you left. And because public comment was not allowed until the end of the meeting. And some of these are also updates since I last spoke to this body. Our efforts to save Lincoln Center have recently attracted the attention of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. The National Trust for Historic Preservation is a privately funded national nonprofit organization that works to save America's historic places. The trust has identified Lincoln Center as an important Latino cultural building worthy of preservation. It is the only Latino building in Texas that has been identified as an endangered building. It was featured in the National Trust Preservation Nation blog on July 25th of this year. And we have received national attention for this effort. The building is an important arts and cultural asset of our community. In 1985 and 86, I curated 2 exhibits there. Juntos 1985, the first international arts exhibit that I organized that year, featured 10 artists from El Paso and 10 from Ciudad Juarez. Among the artists included in the exhibit were the late Manuel Acosta, the late Luis Jimenez, the late Rudy Montoya, the late Marta Arad, as well as others. This exhibit led to the creation of the Juntos Art Association. In 1996, I curated an exhibit of Latino photographers that included individuals like Carlos Fernandez, an El Pasoan and a former Nikon National Award winner. In 1997, I published a book on the murals of El Paso, and some of the mural works found in Lincoln Park are included in that book. Aside from the numerous outdoor murals, the building has 2 important murals inside the center, painted by El Paso artist Carlos E. Flores, that cannot be removed. Mr. Flores studied under Maestro Luis Nishizawa, one of Mexico's premier landscape painters, who died this past September at the age of 96. If the building is demolished, so will the 2 murals. And also the fate of the murals painted on the columns, which were the first murals painted at Lincoln Park after Felipe Adame, that were painted by Carlos Callejo, are in question if TxDOT removes the ramp and removes the protective concrete canopy. Lincoln Center, and we have a handout you should have it. Lincoln Center is within the boundaries of Camp Concordia and is at the site of the 3rd Fort Bliss. Camp Concordia, where the Buffalo Soldiers were stationed, received the Texas State Historical Commission designation in 1982. The marker itself was placed at the center of Camp Concordia. Formerly known as Concordia School, the school was first opened as a one-room schoolhouse in the officers' quarters in 1868. In 1880, the school was expanded to a 4-room adobe building that had served as a guard post between 1880 and 1890. In 1909, when the Lincoln Park addition was registered with the city of El Paso, Concordia School moved to its present site at 4001 Durazno as a 2-room schoolhouse. In 1915, the school expanded to a red brick building and a basement and 13 rooms. So here we see the school itself starting off at Camp Concordia and then moving to its present site. Over 20,000 Mexican and African American children attended Lincoln School in then segregated El Paso. The late Mauro Rosas, who was the first Latino state representative from El Paso from 59 to 63, attended school there in the 1940s. There are also numerous Latino school, Lincoln School alumni who are still alive. We have been told that the building represents a roadblock to TxDOT's effort to build the I-10 to Loop 375 Border Highway Connect. But as you can see, and as you've heard this morning, the building is part of a larger regional story. It reflects our artistic history and community history. We stand before you today to state that there are other viable alternatives to tearing down such an important building that means so much to so many. We hope that TxDOT and the city of El Paso will do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Juarez.
Thank you, Mr. Juarez.
Next speaker, we have Mr. Hector Gonzalez. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Mr. Gonzalez.
My name is Hector Gonzalez. Morning, Mayor. With the Lincoln Park Conservation Committee. My comments this morning will be short. My comments and concerns regarding the minutes of the October 3rd meeting that we attended here at the MPO and the transcript of the responses we received. Many times the reason we attend MPO City Council meetings of this type are to document our concerns, our issues, the statements that we make, and the answers that we receive, and the agencies and the individuals that we receive them from. The minutes of the October 3rd meeting here at the MPO reflect vague remarks, only stating that questions were asked and that answers were given. We feel that this is not the proper documentation of the responses, the questions, the agencies, the individuals that make these statements. We would like to ask right now, is there another recording or another transcript, videotape of the responses and the answers that were given, and how can the public access these? Is there a way to watch the videos on the internet or something of that nature? We feel that the detailed public comments need to be reflected for future use and to keep a public record for the community. These are our issues with the minutes and the way it was transcribed. We're not sure if there is another word-for-word transcription somewhere. We would just like to know where we could access that and how we could get a hold of that. And in closing, I'd like to just ask the city manager. I'd like to thank him for meeting with some of the TxDOT officials when they were here for their Texas Transportation Commission meeting. We're glad to hear that you met with them and shared some of our issues with the Lincoln Center. And we'd like to just state one more time that we're glad to be working with you, and we still intend to have that walkthrough, and we would like to see if there's been any change in the scheduling or anything that we can look forward to as far as when we can make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Sir.
Yes.
I'd like to let everybody know, to the public, is that the MPO's committees, the TPAC, the executive committee along with this policy board that they're recorded. And so there is an audio and also there is a video availability. So if anybody would like to just contact me, we can certainly provide that information.
Thank you. Mr. Rooney.
Do you have somebody on the phone that y'all need to get to? I can go later.
No, no, sir.
Okay. Put the coffee over here so it doesn't get, those tables get kind of shaky there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike Rooney. Councilwoman Lamone and Hector and Miguel, could you go to item number 9? It has Proposition 1, call for projects. I had asked Representative Pickett before the meeting of this 1.4, which you indicated is actually now $1.7 billion, how much might come down to El Paso. And you said you were afraid, if I understood you correctly, it's already divvied up.
No. No, what I said, Mr. Rooney, is I'm going to hold a statewide hearing a week from today on Friday.
Okay.
And in House Bill 1, that was the owner's manual to go with the proposition, says that the money will be distributed by formula funding.
So we may get some.
Yes, sir.
Oh, good, good. That's all I need.
Yeah, all communities, all communities will be getting, will be sharing in that. Our discussions are going to be based on how much money goes into each one of those different categories.
Okay, because I got a project I want to submit right now, and what I'd like you to do, and I'm glad Councilwoman Lamone is here, I'd like you to go through all the projects going back to the $1.2 billion mobility fund, the president's stimulus, and list the projects that each side of town got. And the east side got a whopping load of loot, and right now the west side's going to benefit in a nice big load too. Of course, the northeast got the Northeast Parkway, and I kind of wonder if maybe the lower valley wasn't shortchanged. They were supposed to get the first BRT, that was switched around, and Mesa went first, and there were other smaller projects, improvements they got, but they got the first toll road. And is there any way, if we're going to get new money, and of course we have the Lincoln Center debate that's going on, and hopefully in time some kind of a compromise might be worked out, but could we take $5 million, since this money's going to come steadily each year, right, Representative Pickett?
Yeah, I feel a little uncomfortable talking about until we get to that.
Well,
item,
I just want to put it out there.
Sure.
So people, could we take $5 million of that fund that's going to keep coming every year, give it to Mr. Torres of the CRMMA, and do away with the toll there? So the folks on the, that third lane is tolled, so we could do away with the toll down there, and maybe the lower valley folks could benefit and not have to pay tolls and have a third lane. That's all I have to say, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rooney. Okay, let's go ahead and switch up some of the agenda items so we can move up. Let's go with item number 7 first. They approve the recommendations for these selected projects from the Transportation Alternative Program for fiscal year 2014-15 project call.
To the chair.
Before we begin discussion, there are a few individuals that are signed up for public comment on this matter. Let's proceed with those first. Mr. Rene Rodriguez.
Good morning, Chair, Mayors,
Morning.
Representatives, Council, and County. Glad to be here. My name is Rene Rodriguez. I'm from Socorro. The reason for my visit here is because on this item, I would really want you guys to not approve the recommendations that are here before you. One of the reasons why is because you guys have already a system in place, and that system is by points. And if you go by the recommendation, then you're going to leave us, the city of Socorro, without this funding. The reason why I'm here, and I'm very adamant about this, is because that funding is for our children. You know, we don't have sidewalks. You know, the city of Socorro, for 28 years, has been, and it's sad to say, but our council before us didn't really care about our infrastructure, didn't care about our sidewalks. We're here because when it rains, our children are on the middle of the street, on the middle of our streets, in harm's way, because we don't have any sidewalks, and it's all muddy and it's all rain. You know, we're asking that, you know, just please, you already have something in place, go with that. And I would, hopefully, you guys find it in your heart to say, you know what, hey, do what's right. Do what is right. You already have a system in place. You don't need to take this recommendation, because you're going to leave not the city of Socorro with funding, but our children of Socorro without this funding. So please, don't approve this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rodriguez. Next, we have Mr. Mark Benitez.
Good morning, Mayor Leeser, County Judge Escobar, and distinguished board members. My name is Mark Benitez, and I'm representing the Cielo Vista Neighborhood Association today. I happened to attend the last TPAC meeting, and I was kind of disappointed with the process that day. It seemed like they circumvented the system, especially based on the point system. At least that was my understanding from some of the members that were there in the audience. But I'm just coming again today to ask if you could just reconsider the project that Cielo Vista had on there. That was the city's portion, the Viscount Boulevard Bike and Hike Trail. It's a little over $500,000 and total projects with the city and the federal government's contribution, but it's a project that Cielo Vista has been asking for many years. It's been on our neighborhood action plan for over 10 years. We've been trying to work with the city to get that project done, and I thought it was a very good project. Actually, all the projects that I saw on the list looked great. Enhanced every part of the county. Unfortunately, I guess the monies are not there to cover all the projects. And so, but the reason why I came today was just, again, to maybe clarify the point system, why it wasn't honored or why the system was circumvented, if it was, and just try to get a little understanding. But again, I'm just asking for you all to maybe reconsider what was presented or approved, and maybe look at all the projects, because like I said, they were all very worthwhile projects. As Mr. Rodriguez said, you know, Socorro has a lot of infrastructural problems and challenges, and so, like I said, they all looked wonderful and posed to improve the quality of life and the infrastructure throughout the county. So I would just ask that you all would reconsider that, and our association really does appreciate everything that you all do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benitez. Next, we have Mr. Greg McNichol.
Morning, Board. My name is Greg McNichol. I'm a vice chair of the TPAC committee, and I just wanted to kind of explain a little bit more. You'll probably hear more from Irene in a moment on this. The determining factor, there are 10 good projects that were presented to us. The determining factor became the program year. In the call, the program year is 14-15. You have to have a letting date within that program year. Of the 10 projects presented, only 4 of them met that qualification. The point system was a good system. But the overriding component of the TPAC became the fact that those 4 projects were the only 4 projects that fall within the program year, and we did not want to see the money, if you will, swept and taken back to Austin and redistributed. And based on the knowledge we had, that's the information we used to determine the projects to present to y'all. That's all I had to say, and I'm available for any questions if you have any. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. McNichol.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay. Let's proceed, I guess, with item Number 7, the TPAC chairman, Irene.
To the chair, before she starts, I believe everybody has received a copy. We did an analysis about the scoring, and we wanted to bring that to everyone. And I wanted you to see these before the chair of the TPAC actually speaks. And I'm very concerned, especially in hearing what I just heard right now. I did listen to the audio, Chair, Mr. Chair, and number one, that's one of the issues that I believe I talked to you about having videotaped the meetings and having them available online. It is very disconcerting to be listening to an audio and you don't really know who's talking unless you know the person and you've heard their voice before. But I think that one of the biggest factors that I heard on the audio was that, number one, there was a big discussion about the let date. And yet, if you go through the application, not one item discusses the let date. There's different dates throughout the application, completion dates, but there is no one date. There isn't anything that says let date. On the scoring sheet, there isn't an item that says you're getting points for the let date. On the application itself, it also says when you sign that application, it says you have 4 years to implement this project. I have given you a worksheet. The items that have an X on it indicate that these municipalities entered information but received 0 points. So then if you go to the scoring sheet, you really don't have an explanation on the scoring sheet, one, of who actually scored that project, and number 2, what date they scored it, and why they didn't award any points, or why they did award points. If you look at the check marks on these projects, this is information that the entities did not submit, did not write anything in that specific item, but got points. And then you have the executive director at that meeting stating that they had made sure that if you didn't have the application filled out correctly, you were not even going to be considered. But yet you have entities that didn't fill out information but got points. And so I think the system is flawed. I think the system the process was done poorly. I'm very concerned about it. I believe that we need to be fair, that we need to be equitable, and we need to be transparent. And the council member Rodriguez from Socorro, if you want to see the perfect example, Mayor Ruiz, of a good application, that is probably the epitome of the application. I believe you were number 1 in the scoring because it was almost perfect, and yet it didn't get funded. The discussion was all about the let date, where there is no let date, there is no title saying let date. And so they were then selected based on the let date that is nowhere to be found on the application. Out of 6 entities that applied, 3 of the entities during the discussions were confused about the let date because they couldn't find it. They did make a comment about changing that date, and they did commit, if you listen to the tape, they did commit to making sure that these let dates were done in the federal fiscal year, because we go by federal guidelines here. This is a federal agency, after all. It's created by the federal government. And so I'm very concerned that the system was flawed. I am very concerned that it was not transparent. The score sheets were not made available to the TPAC members. All they got was the total scores. They didn't get the score sheet. In your packet, you have one of the score sheets, and I purposely just made sure that it was one of ours, the city, for Viscount Boulevard. You can see that some of it just has writing on it. There is no formal documentation. There is no formal analysis on it. There is no formal signature on it. There is no formal date on it. So I'm very concerned about this process. I don't believe it was fair. I don't believe that these agencies, every single agency, including the city of El Paso, that submitted these applications knew that if they didn't have the let date correct, that their applications were going to be thrown out. That was a serious concern, and it was almost an hour-long discussion at the TPAC meeting. when you listen to the audio. And so, to the chair, I am very concerned. I believe we need to go back and we need to score these or rescore them because they were not scored properly. They should be funded according to the ranking. When the TPB met, and I believe it was in July, we strongly emphasized, and it was a motion made by Mayor Prano, that we honor the scoring system. And it was seconded by Senator Rodriguez. So I think that that's something that's very, very important. The process is flawed, and so I think we need to relook at this and actually award them according to the scoring points once these are scored appropriately.
Are you making a motion?
And then, okay, well, before we get into further discussion, let's hear from the TPAC chair, and then let's also hear from staff.
Good morning, Irene Ramirez, Chair of the TPAC.
Can you withdraw your motion?
The motion was not recognized. I wanted to hear from TPAC chair and from the staff.
Okay, the item brought before you today is for a recommendation on approval of the 4 projects, simply based on the fact that they indicated they were ready to let in this current fiscal year. I want to clarify that as a member of the city representation on the TPAC, the vote was not unanimous. It was 12-5, and city staff voted against it for some of the reasons that have already been stated, such as the ambiguity in the application, excuse me, and the fact that the score wasn't even considered. It was strictly based on the ability for it to let. After a lot of discussion on the part of the TPAC membership.
I got a question, I'm sorry, there was a motion, sir, there was a motion made, and was it a second? Because I think you can wait on the motion, but you cannot deny a motion, if I'm not mistaken by Mr. Miranda. Can you deny a motion once it's made?
The chair needs to be able to recognize the motion.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
And it has not been recognized. So I think it's proper to have the discussion that you're having about the...
But you can have a discussion once a motion is made, though.
Once, yes, of course.
Sure,
Right, so
but
that's what I was trying
the
to
chair
say.
gets to decide, but ultimately I get to decide it.
Yes,
Ultimately,
you're the
who-
presiding officer, you decide.
Thank you. Okay. Miss, are you done with your portion? Mike, would you like to?
Certainly, what I like to do is have Ms. Stokes present to the policy board what the policy board had approved, and then answer any questions any of the body may have.
Christina Stokes, El Paso MPO. And if I'm allowed, I would like to just give an overview for the new members of the board to understand the process and where we are today. If it's allowable, it'll be brief. Is that okay, Chair?
I said, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. We had a new bill, transportation bill, the Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century, which included a new program called the Transportation Alternatives Program. And this program, referred to as TAP, focuses on the non-motorized project development. So we'd like to have projects that were not motorized, no, and capacity roads and things like that. What the purpose of this was also to include a competitive process. Each state was to develop a process working with all their MPOs and design this competitive process for use. In 2013, as we were nearing 2014, we had funds identified to allocate to the El Paso area for 14, 15, and 16. As we were trying to wait for the text dot to help us and work with us to get a guide statewide, it wasn't happening, and other states were moving forward with developing their own state processes, including New Mexico. So they had their overall competitive process established, working together. In Texas, however, we started to see individual MPOs develop their processes. So with the guidance of FHWA and with our TxDOT, we needed to move forward and get a process going so that we can meet the needs to be able to fund our projects. We saw a template. We used North Central Texas Council of Governments had developed a process. They were in during the call. They had already prepared a timeline, and they were going to go forward with the call. So because of the time frame that we had, we requested to use the template that NCTCOG had available, so that all we needed to do was to tweak the documents, modify them to meet the needs of our region. So in proposing all of that, I was designated our TAP coordinator for the MPO. And I went through the application, I replaced everything that said NCTCOG with El Paso MPO. Did change a couple of things. They were holding back on some categories of funding that would apply under the program, but we recommended to include everything that that program would allow to be covered. So we asked for that. They also eliminated or reduced, or increased, I'm sorry, the match amount on some of the funding. We decided to recommend that overall it's all 80% and 20%, for 80% federal and 20% match for any project that was going to be submitted to our plan. So these documents went forward to the TPAC to help to develop and refine it. And some changes were made according to some of the input we had. And then when the TPAC was satisfied with that, it was moved forward to the board for approval. So when the board approved the documents, they approved the guide, the application, the timeline for the process of the call for projects, and approved the competitive process. And in the guide, it did include the score sheet, which is included in your backup documentation. Because there was no committee established for this, throughout, there was no suggestion of having a separate committee. The score sheet was not modified. It did include all categories. As I said, we included all categories that were eligible for this funding. So even the score sheet was not broken down to if you had so many elements in that you'd get half the points, or so many elements you get all the points. So we had identified at the very beginning I would be responsible for scoring, and we would find more MPO staff to help with that. So in trying to keep with what the board approved, we followed these factors here for the evaluation of the categories. And what we did was we decided, well, since we don't have a scale breaking down the points, we don't have a separate committee, we're going to do the best we can to support what was approved by the board. So with each category, what we had looked for in each application was project-specific information. Because this is a competitive process, each application needed to stress the importance of that project. So we looked at the overall application. We looked at the descriptions. We looked at questions directly related to the scores. And if they met project-specific information for the category, they got all the points. If they didn't, they got 0 points. Yes, there were some answers that were not filled out, but we referred also to the job description, the project description, to see if we can find project-specific information that also aligned with the questions. Because we were looking at the overall application, because this was a new process and not everybody was familiar with it. One, we did not disqualify any incomplete applications. If we did that, we'd have a smaller list than what you're looking at right now. Two, we did not eliminate any that were not for the program year. That was not our task. Our task was to score projects, present them to TPAC, and have them discuss them. There was not a let phrase in the application, but there is a question in the application that describes one of the milestones, which would be interpreted as a let date. We had TxDOT concur with that. The reason why we used the phrase let is because as a technical committee, TPAC was familiar with that term, which means that you would be able to obligate those funds in that program year. We did not eliminate anything. We scored everything as we were told to do, tasked to do, presented it to TPAC for their ranking and discussion and to consider what projects were truly eligible for this program year. That's where we stand right now. You see all eligible, well, not all eligible, but you see all applications listed on your backup showing which ones were recommended and which ones were not recommended. And that's where we stand today.
Representative Moody.
A quick question. When you talk about the interpretation of something to mean a let date, or to be able to be obligated in a certain amount of time. What language was interpreted to mean that exactly?
There
It's
is
in the packet. It's in the packet.
a
right?
milestone, there's a question as a milestone in here that identifies how ready you are just to be, yes, under the readiness, how ready you are to actually be able to obligate the project in the program year. So that question, I have it, do you have it to show it? It's also, it's entitled Project Design and Preparation of Construction Package. So that would mean at that point, you're ready with your environmentals, you're very ready with your design, you have everything ready to go to TxDOT to review and be able to give you letting authority or obligation of the project. So that date indicates that you'd be more able to obligate and let that project in the appropriate program year. So that was the title of the question in the application, Project Design and Preparation of Construction Package. And we checked with the engineering and TxDOT, our TxDOT people that are here, to understand that that would be a good indicator of this project being able to follow the program year.
But specifically didn't lay out a let date component?
No, but this would be referred to as a let date in the technical.
In technical terminology. When was that explained to the people that were proposing the application?
During the time frame that we've had these applications, you know, no questions were asked. I don't understand this question. They either responded or they didn't. I had no phone calls asking about the application itself. During the whole process, there was no comments about anything being not clear or maybe possibly be changed. All 10 applications were turned in the last day of the project call. So there was no time for interaction to say, yeah, maybe you need to change this, or can you correct this? Once it was closed, it was closed. It's a competitive process. You either have everything that you need or you don't. But we were not going to disqualify anybody. We were not going to throw anybody out. We were going to try to score them all the best that we could.
I think possibly you had some people looking at what should be objective scoring, and now we're looking at something that had to be interpreted to get to a certain conclusion, and I think that's kind of where we are, why we are where we are, unfortunately.
Yes.
You know, it's great to have, you know, technical interpretations, but for those people making these applications, you know, we probably need to be clearer in the process, and I don't know what we do to fix that at this point, but.
No, absolutely,
Yeah.
there's room for improvement. As we were going through the evaluation process, we did realize that because we didn't have a committee and we didn't have a determination of how these actual points would be distributed, that was going to be an issue. But we tried to do the best we could with what we had to try to show and demonstrate the competitiveness of the process that was approved.
Christine, let me ask a few questions. The scoring sheet itself that you put in the packet was also provided. Did the applicants see this, or is this just an internal document?
No, that was published on our website as well.
Okay, so they
Went
saw
through it.
that, and the last item on here says project readiness, ability to initiate construction
Yes.
quickly. So that was clear. Now, remind me, because I believe a lot of us were trying to sell this program. The first round, we didn't get any bites.
No, we did not. and
So nobody applied?
No.
So then we made a pitch, some of us made some calls to different entities saying, hey, nobody applied. Let's apply. So now.
And we asked for a 1-month extension.
So we did that, and now people are applying thinking, nobody asked, I'm going to go ahead and apply, I'm going to get the money. We don't have enough for all that applied, and the ones who didn't get it are obviously the only ones that are complaining. I made a comment in September that if we could find a way to fund all of them, would be the best thing. I still think we can do that, by the way.
I believe so.
And in the meantime, clarifying the process. You said that all the applications came in the last day.
Yes, they did.
The last day.
The last day.
Now,
even 3 minutes before 5.
3 minutes before
The last
5
one we got.
on the last day.
Yes.
When did TPAC then meet to discuss the
I made a
applications?
presentation to advise them of all the applications on the list and how much funding was being requested on September 17th.
the day that the applications were due and when TPAC actually met, how much time in between there? That's what I'm looking at.
It was probably a couple of weeks, because
Okay.
we had an August meeting prior to that. I did forget to let you know, the only liberty we took on the scoring sheet was at the project readiness, the 15 bonus points.
Right.
Because they were bonus, we thought, well, of all those items that are on there, there's one that said if you had more than 20% match, you'd get points. So my coworker, Hugo Hernandez and I were discussing that. We broke it down to 3 points each and eliminated that one, so that each one of the 5 that were left were worth 3 points, and we were giving points. So I'm sorry, I did need to clarify that.
I'm not real clear what the motion that was originally made was, but what I think we ought to do is start from scratch and have everybody understand what the criteria is, and forget that my purpose is trying to fund all of them. I would like to see what would happen if we just did it again. There may be some new information that wasn't offered, so it might change, but if people are putting in applications at 5 minutes to 5 on the last day and not interacting, asking, because we hear this in all the different programs out there. Call us, let us know if you need some help filling out the application, what's going to give you extra bonus points. And it looks like just, again, everybody assumed their project was going to be approved and thought, no big deal. So I think there's culpability to go around. I don't think there's anything sinister about this. And I heard a little bit about it, so we have a little bit of flexibility. You probably saw the letter. I got permission from TxDOT to use 2016 dollars now if we have projects that are ready to go. My fear is they still won't be ready to go, but we have another 1.14 million that's on the table if we want to go ahead and use that. I believe from the reconciliation, because I'd made this comment, I think in September, that we ought to try to fund all of these, but I don't want to just do that without making sure everybody feels comfortable that the next time we do a competitive process, that everybody's on the same page.
No, absolutely, and I think if we do another competitive process, that we also include a deadline for pre-application that would force people to come in and show us what we've got, so we can make sure we're on the same page and we're helping them along the road before a final deadline.
So, I mean, there's a lot of times, you know, TxDOT will have a pre-construction meeting after they award something. I mean, we do this on awards. Can't we ask all the applicants to come to a meeting that says, here's the application, here's what's going to get you a good score? Because the same folks who didn't get it in this round, the same information is going to be available to those who...
We did do a workshop as
who
well.
Scored,
left it open for questions.
But the ones who did score higher under this process, they probably have the ability to increase their rankings the next time around too, don't you think?
Okay, before, so we got a lot of questions here, but first, I mean, Mr. Bielik, I know during the TPAC you had approved the recommendations from TPAC. Is there, okay. I don't know if you had any other input being from TxDOT.
The only issue that folks need to remember is that the funds are need to be obligated in a particular year. So and as far as I know, you can't obligate funds based on estimates. So,
okay.
Eddie, do you have?
Judge Escobar had a question, and then the city manager had a question after that.
So I just wanted to be sure, so you all had a workshop in order to address, did I hear you correctly?
Yes,
In
we
order
did
to
have
address
one.
all
We
this?
held it on May 7th.
Okay.
Before the call. The call was open May 14th.
Okay.
Okay.
Eddie Waltier, Texas Department of Transportation. I just want to make one comment. Whatever comes out of this, all agencies and all their staff need to go back and look at the projects and look at the timelines and make realistic timelines, because it's one thing to do the plan set, which is the mechanical work. There is federal money, so you still have environmental process, you still have right-of-way. I doubt there's right-of-way on these projects, but look at all the requirements that the feds have for this type of money. You can say you're going to have it in 2015, 16, 17, but if you're going over a historic canal, if you're in a historic district, those things take time. What we don't want to end up is with everybody submitting for 2015, and then in August or 1 month prior to that, we're all trying to squeeze these projects through the system, and the system is not built for that. So please, we'll go back and we're definitely willing to work with everybody and help everybody out here, but what we don't want to do is just make unrealistic timeframes. Thank you.
Mr. Medina, you wanted to say something?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think one of the things that I just wanted to point out as well is that, like Representative Pickett had mentioned, is that there is an attempt here to look at these projects through, a performance-based planning mechanism, and certainly it may not be perfect, but I think also one of the things that he had stated is that, we need to find a way to fund these projects. They're good projects. They're regional significant projects. So staff had done an analysis, and at this point I'd like to recognize Mr. Williams, the Assistant Director, to let you know of the capability of us moving forward with all these projects that were submitted for fiscal year 15, and we can fund them in short.
Thank you. Good morning, Roger Williams with the El Paso MPO. Some very good points that have been made about the fiscal year and the obligation of these funds. And the scoring, yes, I think that the scoring can be looked at again, and we could actually probably rescore some of these projects, and they would probably score higher. But the funds that are for the 2014-15 call are for obligation in 2015, and that's what was driving some of these projects outside of the eligibility. And the points about the milestones that have to be met, those milestones leading up to that obligation and obligating the funds for construction are driving whether or not that project can actually be, and the word "let" was used, and maybe we should go back and say to be obligated. These funds need to be obligated within a fiscal year that the funds are allocated to us. And back to the possibility, and MPO staff has been looking at this, and there's other funds that may become available. It's preliminary at this point, but we go through every year at the end of the fiscal year 2014. Right now we're looking at funds through the reconciliation that may be available in other funding categories and may be able to be rolled over into the 2015 year. And if these funds are available, we are looking at the ability to fund and fill the gaps and fund all of these projects. Again, though, with that said, these funds now would become 2015 funds, and the obligation for these funds are for 2015. Okay, so your projects, if we score them again, and the scoring is different, the expectation is that they are able to be obligated in 2015. Back to the 2016 TAP call, and that those funds, and through coordination with TxDOT, that there's the possibility that some TAP projects using 2016 funds could potentially be accelerated as well. So we're looking at all of these possibilities, and would like to go back and see what we can do and potentially fund these projects.
Can I make a point, Mr. Chairman? Well, we've had this problem before on, because there's some applicants who just want to change the let date without any basis for that, proving it up. If we hold true to this, what are we going to do to those applicants who can't meet the let date? Because it's been a big problem for this MPO where an entity or sponsor says we can do it, but they don't perform. So how are we going to hold them, their feet to the fire, and make that happen?
Yes. As you've seen in the last year, we've come to a point where there are projects that just cannot make the fiscal year. And at the state level, that has a lot of implications on their ability to utilize our funds, not only in the region, but statewide. And there's an expectation that we will be able to get those projects or those funds obligated. So if we find projects that are expected to make a 2015 obligation, but that they can't. The recommendation from the MPO would be to program those funds on projects that can use those funds so that the MPO, the El Paso MPO, is not losing funds to other parts of the state. We want to keep all of our funds here. We want to keep all of our funds in El Paso. So the MPO has to look at the readiness of these projects and whether or not they're going to have that ability to use those funds. And at some point, we would have to make recommendations on if those projects can, what we would have to do. And I'd also like to say that 2016 funds that may become available through TAP, we do historically look at projects through the ability of everybody to submit projects for that. So there's a lot of things that we need to do to bring all of this together and hopefully find a way to get all of these very good projects funded.
Okay, it's going to be Mr. Bielik, then the city manager, and then Mayor Miller.
We've been dancing around this, but let me just lay it out for you. This MPO has a history on local lead projects of not making lead dates, of not getting projects done in the fiscal year that they're supposed to be done. And if you want to set the stage and have a bunch of projects that aren't going to make it, it's not going to help us statewide. I mean, the reality is, let's put the good projects down, but let's put them down in a reasonable year. Today, we are in November. If you are not well along on the environmental process, if you don't have your design started or at least your consultant selected, you don't have a snowball's chance in hell of getting a project let in this fiscal year. So I think we need to be reasonable as to what actually can be done, and that's not to say you don't do good projects. Let's just put them in the appropriate year.
City manager. Mr. Gonzalez.
I forgot my point. That's a while back. No, I'm kidding.
You were going to say you're sorry, it'll never happen again.
No, I'm not going to say sorry for anything I haven't done. What I am going to say is I think the Representative Pickett made some very, very good points. I think Mr. Bielik did as well. Let me tell you what we've done, because I know what you're talking about. We have augmented the engineering staff. We are paying for outside help as well to augment the staff. We will pay for, what did you call them, Irene, CSGs? When you get up to the podium, can you speak to that and I'll add my comments to that?
Part of the issue is if we're going to pay for the design in order to advance these projects and have them ready. The environmental also, we're going to need assistance to get it reviewed. There won't be any chargeable CSJs on these projects yet. So we need to enter into some kind of agreement with TxDOT so that you all will review them and get these approved, even though they're not projects with chargeable CSJs to them as yet.
And we have to pay for that?
Well, I would imagine we will.
We will pay for that if necessary. We will pay for that, is what I'm saying. So when we bring projects, we'll pay for the design, pay for the right-of-way. We're not going to bring projects forward just in concept only. We will bring them forward with the design piece, the right-of-way piece. So that's what I wanted to make sure that the MPO heard. And I think that you're used to, I guess, a different kind of come from the city. And it's concept only. The right-of-way has not been dealt with. The design has not been done. And that is changing. I've met with Mr. Medina. I met with the commissioner, the chairman, to express that. I don't know what else to do other than to show you. So that's what we're doing. And I will continue to do that. I'll continue to put that in front of Mr. Medina and also Mr. Bielik and the commissioner as well.
Mayor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. And I understand. That's great. Horizon City was very fortunate this go-round to have two projects actually approved by and recommended by the TPAC. But it was also at that meeting that we discovered that, to Mr. Bielik's point, we were going to have to plan them a little differently than what we had before. And so we agreed to do our own engineering and are ready to go. Well, based on the scoring, then that's a lot more bonus points to those projects because our match goes up. So I understand your position. We put in a good application. Should we go back and revisit this, I feel sure that some projects are going to fall out.
I'm not, sir, I'm not suggesting that they be revisited. I'm agreeing with Mr. Medina and the representative that they all should be funded. If the ones that got graded under the current system, they should stay in place would be what I think, if the rest of them would be funded, because I don't think that the process was fair, and I don't think it was consistent. And you can explain it 9 different kinds of ways, and you cannot convince me just based on merit. It was not a merit-based system. You talk about performance-based review, you need to do it. And so our applications were good ones, and there was nothing in there specific to the points that had been made relative to a let date. And so if some folks magically put those on there, that's fine. I'm not begrudging that. They should be funded. I'm not saying they shouldn't be funded. So that's not my issue. My issue is that we're ready to go. I don't think that the process was clear, wasn't concise, and the points have already been made. I'm not going to repeat them. And I think it's pretty plain to see. I mean, it's all in black and white. So relative to all the other statement that was made about how no one submitted projects, I think the deadline was extended before the deadline was ever reached. In my understanding, the July date. So that was a point that was made, and I understand the point. So there's a lot of nitpicky points that are being made here today, and I think the bottom line is the greater good, as Mr. Medina has pointed out, is that those 4 projects, or whichever projects got approved, they should stay approved. If there's funding in place with reconciliation dollars or otherwise to fund the others, I think they should, because of the process. Everyone's still learning, and that's being very kind, in terms of learning. There's nothing to learn. I mean, you can just put an objective process in place, everybody fill it out. But I mean, there was a lot of confusion in the process. So that being said, I think if there are reconciliation dollars, if there is a way to fund them all, I think we should do that and just go forward and just get on to the next item. That's what I think we should do.
To the chair.
Representative Acosta, then Mayor Reese.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, everything is based on the let date, but the let date was not a scoring point, is what I'm trying to make. I don't know where this is going today, but I'm going to say that this process is flawed. This process has to change in the future for the next call of projects. If the let date is a component, then give it a score. Score it accordingly. Everything that's on the score sheet, make sure that it mirrors, that it's on the application. When the score is done, I believe that whoever is scoring that has to let us know why that entity received points or did not receive points instead of being subjective. I believe we heard today that they considered the overall project and not specific scoring. And if that's the case, then why have a scoring sheet? Why have a scoring point system? So I think this whole, what we have learned today is that this process needs to change, it needs to be modified. I'm very concerned, I'm still concerned that these entities have indicated and did indicate, based on what I heard on that audio, that they were ready to go. And I will say again that the application from the City of Socorro was the best. It was completed correctly. If you want to have an example of a good application, use that one. And they were very concerned, and I think you heard from their council member, and I think you've heard from us right now, that these scores need to be honored. I think that based on what the council member has indicated, what the City of Socorro has indicated, what the City of El Paso has indicated, I think that the scores based on how they ranked should stand. Now, obviously, it's subjective again, because we entered information on some of those columns and we got no points. Yet on one of them, we entered nothing and got points. And that was on, and I'll show you. That one was on the, I believe it was the, I'm sorry, on the serving the disadvantaged. We got points, we got 5 points for that. We couldn't even find it on the application. So the application is considered in its entirety. So you're saying that that one application served the disadvantaged. The City of Socorro got 0 points for that because they don't serve the disadvantaged?
I appreciate you're looking at me, but this is not.
No, I'm not looking at you. I'm not looking at you. Just so you know, Mr. Bilik, I can see you, but I can't see your face, okay? I see your face is blurry. I can't see you from far. But I'm saying again, and this is to everyone, and you know, I respect Representative Pickett saying let's fund them all. I think that they should all be funded. But again, the process is flawed. The process needs to change. Whether you fund them all or fund them not at all, the process is flawed and the process needs to change. The process also needs to include video of those meetings. And the other thing that I have a concern with is that there are members that sit on the TPAC and vote, and then sit on the TPB and vote again. So that's another concern that I have. Now, I understand that the Federal Highway Administration is listening. I'd like to know what their comments are concerning this entire process.
Okay, before that, Mayor Reese.
Yes, I have some comments about this. Like Ms. Acosta said, it's pretty clear that the city of Socorro had the highest grade. And I mean, I think from what I've heard so far, that the confusion only started at the TPAC meeting. I think it was pretty clear. You have an application, here are your standards, go ahead and do it. Whether you turned it in the day before, 2 days before, or the day of, 3 minutes, like they said, you turn in the application and you were aware of what they're requiring of you. And they graded the application, and those are the scores right here. And I don't think there's any confusion about that. I think the confusion started at TPAC when they said, well, that's when the let date was brought in. You know, and we met with Mike and Roger, and we asked them, well, how can you be sure that the projects they're saying that they will let will actually let? And they said, I mean, is there a guarantee that they will? Can you enforce that? And they said, well, that's an issue that we have to fix. So in truthfulness, you can just put a date. You know, I'm not saying that they did that. You can put a date and say we'll be ready by this time and not be ready, just so you get that extra push. So I don't think there was any confusion on the application process. I think we all knew what it was. It was just until TPAC got along that it changed. And like Mr. Pickett said, and Mike, we should fund all these projects, we should. But I think we have to honor the fact that we had a competitive process, and we have to honor the fact that they were top scores and they were low scores. I mean, for Christ's sakes, we're going to go ahead and do a 54, which is like 30 points lower than us. And you're telling me that that's fair. You know, it really isn't fair. We're trying the best that we can. We got, for once, Socorro got first in something, and we're, you know, we're trying to take it away from us. You know, and I just want the members to know that, you know, we support everybody here. We all want the projects to be funded, but we have a process in place. If we can fund all of them, great. But I agree with Ms. Acosta, you know, we should fund first the ones that are ready now. Because just because you say you're going to fund it in May of 2015, you know, I don't know how ready the county is to do that. You know, but if you had the highest score, that should be awarded. You know, it should be that way, and it was that way. It just got switched around and whatnot. But that's just my opinion on that.
Okay. Mr. Carrizal.
Do you know, listening to the whole process and sitting on the TPB board at one time, again, what Mr. Bielek said, you know, we have projects that are promised, the dates come up and we can't fulfill the promises. If the board so chooses to go back and reevaluate this, then there should be a line in there too that says where each individual entity can prove where they're going to fund the project. Be specific, say it's on our projects, for example, the sidewalk projects, we have an item in our road and bridge budget where we set the money aside. And we need to show on that form that the money's committed for that project and that project only. By the same token, I don't want to have, you know, say we have the 400,000 set aside or 200,000 set aside, and on 5 different applications, I put it in there. You know, it has to be shown. There has to be some way to show that we have the commitment there, that you're in the process of doing what you need to do, and not just say we're going to grab the money just to grab the money, and here's the money, we're going to have to put it up. The county is ready. We do have the money set aside. It was appropriated in our budget. It was specifically asked for through Commissioners Court, and they went ahead and approved it. If we're going to do that, then let's go ahead and do it, and let's have each submitting applicant show some kind of certification or an affidavit saying, yes, the money is there, and it will be not moved.
And to the chair, I agree with Mr. Carrizal. The city of El Paso, again, we passed a resolution saying we will commit 20% of the matching dollars to these projects. There's a resolution in place that was approved prior to this the application even being submitted. So if you're concerned about, oh, it was submitted on the day of, we met the deadline. whether it was a minute before, we met the deadline. And we met the deadline again because things have to happen, have to be placed on the agenda, have to be approved. But it was a unanimous vote that we had. There was nowhere on your application that says attach a resolution or commitment from the agency stating that you have the 20% match. So these are things that we need to learn about, and things that maybe the application needs to be revised to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Because you're right, Mayor Ruiz, the whole conversation turned on, it was not about the scoring, it was only about the lead date at the TPAC meeting. That was a whole hour-long discussion about we're only gonna fund you if you have the lead date, and the interpretation of the lead date is subjective, because it doesn't say anywhere bid date, process date, it says completion date. And so many agencies, 3 of the 6 agencies interpreted that to be when the project was going to be completed, when the last piece of brick and mortar was going to be placed. And so with that, I think we need to make those changes. And again, we need to make sure that the agencies understand that it's a federal guidelines that we're following, that it's a federal fiscal year. It must be led in the federal fiscal year, not in our own fiscal years, because some of us may have different fiscal years like the city. So I think that's very important. And again, to the commissioner, I know you didn't recognize my motion, but my motion is to actually award the projects based on the scoring. And the scoring is flawed. It is flawed. It has been very subjective, and you heard it right now. So I think that the MPO, and I don't know how fast you can do this, but if you go back to these categories and add the points that people didn't get, Socorro didn't enter 2 items, didn't get any points on that. Otherwise, Mayor Ricci probably would have had 115 score, because you had a very good application. But I am not going to support awarding simply based on confusion on the lead date. It was based on the lead date. So I cannot support it the way it stands right now.
Okay, Representative Pickett.
But I do want to stress something that Ms. Acosta said earlier, that in the application, the only thing that mentioned time-wise was the 4 years, that you have 4 years to go ahead and do the project. And our grant writer spoke to me about that, and he said, look, you have 4 years. You know, once you get the project, it says you have to finish within 4 years, that's when you have to go ahead and do it. And again, it's just the let date. We were told, months ago that old vehicle tanks would be let in October of this year, and that hasn't happened for various reasons. But the let date is not always going to be there. It can change, and we shouldn't base it off of that.
Representative Pickett.
Again, I just want to clarify when there's a motion. I don't think today we can guarantee to fund all of them. I think that's the way we're moving. I have about a 99% favorable guess that we'll have enough money to fund them all. As we've said, we have another $1.14 million we can now add to the mix. But I think we need to go back and make sure that everybody is on the same page. If the motion that Representative Costa makes, just based on the rankings, I'd be fine with that if those projects can be let. It doesn't sound like today all 10 projects can commit to that. So if we did that, then we're back into what Mr. Bielik said. We make all these promises, but when we can't let them. So I would suggest, and whenever everybody's ready to move on, my suggestion would be to go back and start from scratch. And I don't think it's going to take much time. We've already got the applications. I'm not saying open it up, and I'm not saying having a new call. I'm saying take the projects that we have, go back and redo this under clarity on whether or not they need to be let in 2014, 2015, and let that be the deciding factor. And know that there's a commitment by this board to fund all the projects, but I would not suggest funding all of them if we don't have a clear process, and I don't think we should fix it later. I think we need to fix it now. I don't think it's broken, personally. I think that the people that are involved in this are professional and should know that when a call goes out for 2014, 2015, even though the application says within 4 years, I don't think we're talking 2019. I think we're talking right now. So let's be clear about that. Let's be clear and do the point rankings, because again, these others, Mayor, and I know you have a problem with this, maybe going back and re-looking at it, but 81, maybe yours will come back at 115 because everybody now has new information from what they had before, but I don't know how we go forward without going back and making everybody feel confident. And there's going to be some losers. That's what gets me, is there's not enough money today to go around. So we go back and do this, someone's going to not be in that first round, and they're going to say that the process was flawed again because they didn't rank. That's where that's the real problem.
Well, with all due respect,
Judge Escobar.
So Representative Acosta, I hear you. And it sounds like we definitely all can improve this process. And I think we really should listen to all of the criticisms about the process and improve it going forward and make whatever changes necessary to make it more transparent and more clear. And in fact, I think if on the application, if something's not ready and can't be proven to be ready, that the application is just rejected, so that there's not even a point system for it. If it's not going to be ready, it shouldn't even be a competitive score to make sure that people know, it's a process for projects that are ready to go within the requirements. And while I agree with most of what Representative Pickett has said, I guess I have a question for whoever can answer this. If we go back again and make it more clear that the projects have to be let during the time period that they need to be let, would it change the outcome of the TPAC recommendation? I mean, because unless I didn't understand Chairman Pickett's recommendation to go back, I mean, it would change it?
I don't know if it would change it. I don't know. I think if it's clear.
Or would the ones that are not, the project's not ready to be let, would they be kicked out of the process?
Well, I think one of the things we would need to look at is project scheduling. So how ready is a project ready to go? That's the first criteria. Because understanding that those projects may not have all the elements as Mr. Bielik has identified, they'll fall out. And so the idea here is that if we have the $3.9 million available and projects can demonstrate through a project scheduling that they can move within the time frame, then those are the ones that should come back to the policy board. But ultimately is that if you all decide to do that and have TPAC review it, I mean, that's something that we can do relatively quick. Again, I think Roger, just correct me if I'm wrong, is that the idea here is that we still have ample time to bring it back to the policy board. And I think the intent was to bring it to you all again in December. We can wait till January so that we can make the step revision in February. So there is time. We can do it.
The only other thing that I would offer is, I think to say let's award them based on the scoring, yet the scoring is flawed. That I don't see the purpose in doing that. And so I think a lot of lessons learned through this process. I personally would support moving forward with the TPAC recommendation, and I know there's a motion in a second already, but if that one doesn't fly, I would make a motion to accept the TPAC recommendation, but also to change the process going forward to make it clear and to not waste people's time going through the process or the scoring system if they're not ready to be let, especially in consideration of what Mr. Bielik discussed earlier.
Mr. Chairman?
If it
comment. I just want to make clear for the record that the City of El Paso does not have an issue with this because of our score. The City of El Paso, our position is that it just be scored fairly and that it be clear on what is being scored. That's it. We're not ready to go? Fine, don't fund it. But I don't want that to be repeated and no one say anything to it as if it's silence meaning that it's true. That is not the case. If we want to be scored based on our merit, that's it. And I know the experiences y'all have had in the past because you have shared it with me. I've already expressed to y'all what we're going to do going forward, and I just want to be clear on that.
And to the chair, I think the judge's recommendation is an excellent one, to have a project schedule attached to the application for future reference, so that you know when we anticipate having the environmental clearance, the design, the environmental clearance, the lead date, because it was too subjective this time. I still believe that and my motion was to go back and rescore these, and then bring them back in December. I think a lot of it was very subjective, the entire process, and get those documents or resolutions from the councils saying, yes, we're ready, we have made a commitment and we're ready. Because I don't think that we should be penalizing those 3 entities that were confused on that lead date. And this is exactly what happened. Out of 6 agencies, 3 were confused on the lead date. And so that was the basis of the entire thing. And again, to the judge's point, everyone went through the process. I mean, we spent a lot of time on it. Every entity spent a lot of time on it. And then for us, everyone to say, well, never mind what your score is based on the lead date. So that is not fair. That is not a fair process. So I'm going to make, and again, the motion that we rescore these projects and get that resolution from, or proclamation, whatever it is, from each of the entities on the lead date, and bring it back to the TPB in either in December or an earlier date if possible.
Mayor Plano.
I beg your pardon, but the original motion made by Representative Acosta was to approve projects based on scoring, and second by Luis.
Well, that one was not recognized.
No, you already did. You established your.
But what I'm saying is to score them fairly.
No,
Okay, they need to be
I'm talking about
rescored.
the motion. I'm not talking
Okay.
about the discussion.
Mr. Miranda.
For clarification purposes, Representative Acosta, are you now amending your original motion?
Yes, I'm amending my original
Okay. All
motion
right.
to include that.
And is there a second to that amended motion?
There's a second.
What's the motion again? Now?
And is it recognized?
What is
The motion is to rank it according to the scoring, but to send it back to the TPAC to rescore the applications and make sure that they have a commitment from each of the agencies on the lead date. Rescore it and base it on the scores. Because I think it's important that we base it, if we have a scoring system, then use the scoring system.
But if the letting is a part of the criteria,
It's not,
because on the sheet, it's got it right, it's right here.
Mr. Beal.
Let me make a suggestion to you. This is a call for a particular fiscal year. So the letting date is a fatal flaw if it is not in that fiscal year. If you approach it that way, then the letting date only says whether it's eligible for that year or not.
Okay.
I think what I just got was the the project readiness and other factors is 15 points.
That was a bonus.
Okay, that's the score.
That was a bonus
The
on that
addition,
one.
the bonus is
Right.
the lead date.
And so I guess
That's
that was one of my
that's
questions
how
as well.
the TPAC has.
That as a bonus, that was a bonus 15 points, and most entities got 6 points and 3 points. One got 9. So for the most part, it didn't seem to make much of a difference. And then at the end, we still say the lead date is what matters, even though for the bonus, we all pretty much scored the same. But I know as far as they're saying you have a resolution, I mean, if that's what it takes from us as well, we can put in the money, we can put in the money to pay it and be ready for 2015. But again, if we kick it back, I mean, that's fine. We just have to make sure that we do it right, and if that day is what we need to do, we'll pay for whatever we have to do to get half this project ready.
Can we ask staff some technical stuff? Because I think we're all kind of about there, but I don't think we've given enough direction. If we send this back to TPAC, they're going to sit there going, I'm not clear as what the policy board told us to do, and so in December, could we get staff, Mike or some, can you give us some more clarity, Christina? What do you need specifically from this body to go back with all the information that you currently have and re-evaluate? But if you re-evaluate with just what we have, that means you can't change anything that's on the applications.
And that's fine,
So
Representative
nothing changes if you just go back and take the 10 applications and rescore it under what criteria? Fairly.
Representative Pickett, if you want to rescore based on what you have right now, then there are some entities that submitted information and got 0 points for that.
And that's letting dates.
No, that's other criteria.
Okay, so.
Not just.
Versus
the-
other
but
ones,
again, if you
versus
have-
other ones did not even respond and got 10 points.
But if you have 10 projects, and the highest scoring of those, six have 100, 6 are 100, but those 6 can't even be let till 2019, what do we do?
Mayor Miller.
Yeah, that was my question. It was my understanding that to be eligible for this funding now, they had to be able to go in 2015. If we reevaluate the proposals, it's still going to be, those are the only ones eligible because those are the only ones that can go in 2015.
I would recommend.
That was sort of my point.
Because I would recommend we don't change anything except for one thing, that we ask the 10 applicants, the 10 applications. We're not going to change anything other than, are you ready to go now or not?
That's fine.
That should be included in a rescore.
I think that's fine.
That's fine.
And so.
That's fine,
That makes sense.
Representative
And
Excuse me, a question
They
here.
can be, they can let and be funded. Because some, I think that's important.
And so this would be an answer from the TBAC, or this would be a question from TBAC. Here's our rankings. This is how they ranked. Yes, Socorro ranked the highest at 86. Now let's ask Socorro, are you ready to let in the 2014-2015 federal fiscal year? Yes or no? All 10 of those need to be asked that question, then rescore with that information.
Yes.
Is that okay?
And that's exactly that's the point. Okay, yes.
However.
We'll make that point.
Okay, Mayor Miller.
Go ahead.
You take that friendly amendment.
I'll take that friendly amendment.
Can I, and let me, if I could just let you know, I'm going to vote against it, just here's why. And I feel like Representative Pickett, I wish all of them could be funded, and I have a feeling they will be funded just in the next round. And so really, at the end of the day, I think it's just going to be a matter of months difference of what gets funded when. And so I think even the projects that we're debating right now, it's not like they're going to get kicked out permanently, I don't think. I think it's just a matter, again, of months. My issue with not going with the TPAC recommendation, and I can agree with everything that you all have said, that the process needs to change, et cetera, et cetera. And I can absolutely understand if the county were in that position, I'd be doing the very same thing. I do think, though, that we have to honor the TPAC recommendation because it is based on letting, and to go back and say, okay, you can, tell us if you're going to be ready or not. What if jurisdictions say, yeah, we're going to be ready, and then we're here in the same spot again, mixing things up, trying to substitute projects that are going to be ready when we know from the onset right now. And so I think, I think the TPAC needs to understand that we need to get all of the projects funded, maybe expedite that process so that those that are in the queue feel assured that they're going to get the funding and they have the time that they need to get ready and get everything in order to be ready. But I'm going to support the TPAC recommendation for that reason.
And I'm going to support
Mayor Miller.
We don't always get a do-over. This is a competitive process. And when in business, I don't get a do-over. I either submit a good proposal or I don't get awarded. And we followed the instructions. We submitted good projects, and we were approved. And so now we get a do-over. And people can change their information.
They can't.
They can change their information in that they can move their let date whenever they want to. So that's changing. I don't have any way to improve except for some more information. But I just feel like we went into a process, honestly, we submitted honest applications, we submitted good applications, and they were approved, and suddenly it's a do-over. So.
And to the chair, I think he has a question. I have a question also.
City Manager, Representative Costa, and then we'll go to staff, and then we'll take a vote.
I agree with the judge. That's the reason I'm going to support the motion, because it is based on let date. And I don't agree with the mayor from the standpoint of the do-over. I don't think this is a do-over. I think in a competitive bidding process, whenever there's an error, or something was overlooked, or something was not clear to all the bidders, it all either gets kicked out or it gets amended based on what's fair and consistent. And I think that's all that's being done here.
And to the chair and to Mayor Miller, I think the lead date was very subjective. It was not something that was in the document itself, in the application. And I reiterate again, out of 6 entities, 3 were confused on that issue, on the lead date. And so my motion stands, and I think we need to go back and we need to ask the agencies again if they're ready for the lead date. They were not allowed to change the date at the TPAC. I think you were there, Mayor Miller. And that's fine, but I think it's up to this body to decide what is fair, and the process was not entirely equitable. I think, again, the process needs to be improved, and we can do that going forward. But right now, for these projects, I think we need to go back and we need to allow these entities to say, are you ready, yes or not? I heard from Mayor Reese saying, yes, he's ready, city's ready, and so we were not allowed to do that. That lead date was very subjective, and so my motion stands.
Mr. Miranda.
Procedurally, could we get some clarification, because there was a second to your original motion.
And a second to my amendment.
Okay, I did not recognize, or I did not hear an amendment, a second to the amended motion.
Representative Nair.
And did the chair recognize that?
Yeah, it's recognized.
All right, very good. So then on the table is the amended motion, Representative Acosta, seconded by
Yes.
Dr. No.
Myla, can you restate the amended motion?
The amended motion presented by Representative Acosta is to rank the projects according to the scoring, send it back to TPAC to rescore based on the scoring, and then present it to TPB. Is that correct?
The friendly amendment was the lead date. I don't know that you picked up the lead date. That was a recommendation by Representative Pickett that we
wouldn't
asked
change
the
the
agencies
Okay, can we
about
restate?
their lead date.
Okay,
And just for
so,
clarification, that wouldn't change the lead date on the application, correct?
No, that would be, the recommendation would be to not change any of the scoring points, but it would include the let date for all of them. So in other words, for instance, Socorro says we can meet that let date. That would change, that would be a do-over, Mayor Miller. But some simple math, I just want you to understand, I just did some simple math. If we took 1 through 10 and ranked just right now, the top project, and you went from 1 to 8, we have enough money to fund 1 through 8.
Okay,
Right now.
that's fine.
9 and 10,
That's fine.
project number 9 and 10, if you just ranked them by score. Unless those let dates change, but I'm just offering that. It may change a little bit, but
I have a question, if I can ask a question.
Yes, ma'am.
This is Genevieve with Federal Highway Administration. So, when you did the application process, you did it for FY 2015 to get the project obligated, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And, Mr. Bielik, when you're obligating projects in 2015, my experience is that the state has obligated most of the projects by June or July.
That's correct.
And what I've heard from you all today is that if the projects aren't ready with design completed and environment started at least, you're possibly not going to have those projects ready to go in time. Because I wanted to make a quick point of clarification. We're talking about fiscal years. And for FY15, your STIP is on a state fiscal year. So that is ending in not September, but it's ending in August.
Correct.
So it's really important to get those, anything that's going to be funded in 2015 obligated probably by June or July. So I guess I'm concerned if this goes back, you guys aren't going to really have projects ready to go for June and July. And the other concern I have is if you didn't do a competitive, I mean, these all came out of a competitive process, yes. But if you advertise that competitive process for FY15, and is it the MPO process to promote projects from a previous call for projects into the next available funds? Or do you guys do another call for projects for that next fiscal year so everybody can submit projects?
The standard practice that the MPO has is that it would have a new call.
Okay, so is the MPO changing the process then by selecting these additional projects?
I don't think that we're changing the process. The discussion here is that if, again, if we move forward and fund these projects with the availability of money that we have for TAP, and if the policy board elects to prioritize these projects that fall out of the selection process, I mean, that's a local decision.
The other concern I had was that they gave you their application and they gave you a readiness time frame of when the project was going to be ready to go, and now everybody was, well, not everybody, there's several people talking about changing that date, and it seems kind of, I don't know, arbitrary.
No.
Why are we changing the date now when we find out that we're not going to be able to move forward in 2015 with it? Because this is a historic problem for the MPO, and delivery of your STIP is a performance measure.
Right, I guess Genevieve.
For us.
Okay, Genevieve, this is Mike. What we're going to be asking is a project schedule of all the applicants. So sure, there was a time frame or analysis where we're asking about letting and things of that nature, but from what I'm hearing from the policy board is that we're asking those applicants to provide a scheduling so that we understand that these projects may be obligated in fiscal year 15.
To the Federal Highway Administration, if I may, to the chair, there was the lead date, I mean, we're going back to the lead date, was very subjective. There is nowhere in the application that states the date that the project is expected to be let. So out of the
2015 call for projects.
Out of the 6 agencies that submitted, 3 were unclear about that item. And so that's what we're doing. We're going back and saying it's going to be based on the lead date. And we're going to, because they were not allowed to, because the date was subjective in the application. And there are entities that are ready to be committed.
Application, are you going to put it through as an FY15 call for projects or an FY16 call for projects to make sure that everybody's on the same page and clearly knows when these projects are going to be programmed?
I don't believe that we were going to redo what this call was for 2015. It was absolutely for 2015. But you're asking if we're going to change it to 2016 to include 2016? I don't.
Well, I guess there's confusion about when the project had to be obligated, but whenever you have an FY, 14, I thought everybody was familiar with when that project had to be obligated for those fiscal years, because we went through a lot of discussions this past fiscal year. You guys moved several of the city's projects, I guess, to.
I don't think that's the issue.
So you could not lose that funding.
I don't think that's the issue. I think everyone knew it was going to get funded in 15. I think that they got kicked out because it wasn't on the application.
Due to the information provided by the agencies.
Yeah, it was a given. Yeah, we knew it was 15. So you got a great question, Genevieve. It's just that's the given. Everyone understood that it was $15. They just got kicked out because that wasn't specifically written in there, which was a technical omission
So
to
you're
them
saying
that is not germane to the discussion because everybody knew it was 15.
That's a good point, because if we're assuming that all 10 applicants should know that this was meant to be let in 14-15.
That's right, and they assumed it was going to be let in 15.
So
They were just simply putting the end date, that's it.
If that's the case, then there should just be priority to actually the earliest date in 2014-15 that they can be let, if all of them, because by the sheer fact that they submitted applications, shouldn't we assume that they all knew that they were going to be let in 14-15?
That's right, and to Mr. Bielik's point, I couldn't agree with him more. If the project's more readier to go than the other one, and it's Socorro, for example, knock yourself out. That needs to go number 1. I agree with it 100%.
Mr. Roger, let's go Roger and then Mayor Miller.
In the application, there was bonus points for project readiness. I would just like to point out, so that it's clear, that all of the projects, with the exception of one element of one project in that project readiness, of the projects that were not included in this for eligibility, fell outside the FY 2015. I'm talking about planning activities for design, environmental clearance, right-of-way utilities, preparation of construction package, and what was interpreted to go to let. So MPO staff used these timelines that were provided to us to determine if this was going to be a 2016 or a 2015. So if going forward, the entity is saying let is what we're going to determine if this is eligible or not, I would recommend that this be provided to us so that we know, back to the points that Mr. Bielik has made about, is this project going to be ready in the 2015 timeframe? It's very clear in the application, and what was provided to us is that these projects did not fall in the 2015 timeframe.
Mayor Miller. And this is more of a question to Mr. Bielik, but understanding the process, if we delay this decision another month, will TxDOT be able to ensure the timeliness, getting through the TxDOT process to get these let?
First of all, TxDOT is not going to ensure local government
I didn't think
performance
so.
on anything.
Yeah.
Okay? In fact, I think I've said before that the history of local government performance in this MPO is atrocious. And when I said there's a snowball's chance in hell of getting these projects ready, that really goes for most of the projects, particularly looking at the information up here. So, I mean, don't just put a let date in June or July because you think that will get it funded. I expect if you do that, that you're actually going to let it in June or July. Because Ms. Bales is absolutely correct. If we don't get them let in that time frame, it's not going to get done. And we are on the state fiscal year, which is the end of August, not the end of September because of the STIP. So that's why I said that let date really should be a fatal flaw. If you can't let in this fiscal year in an appropriate time frame, it may be a great project, but we ought to be considering it for next year, not for this year.
Okay. I think we've had plenty of discussion for the reasons that Mr. Bielik has outlined, FHWA's outlined. I'm going to vote against the motion, but let's go ahead and take a vote. And I'd ask for a roll call.
Clarify it just one more time. Because I want to make sure that applicants aren't resubmitting new information.
Correct.
The only thing that's going to happen is that the MPO staff is going to reach out to the 10 applicants to clarify that the information provided them could get these projects let by June or July. Because if that's the motion, that's fair. That means that we've told staff, you've got 10 applications, you rank them. Now reach out and make sure that they can meet that June, July. If they can't, they shouldn't be considered, and I think that's what TPAC did. But we've heard comments that, no, we weren't asked any more questions and couldn't clarify that we could do it on a different timeline. So my understanding is if this motion goes, it would be not to submit any new information on ranking, but that the staff through TPAC would ask all 10 applicants if they want to clarify the reasons they were knocked out
I have a
based on the
question.
letting.
If that's the motion, then what happens if TPAC hears back something different? Then do we begin a new process, or, I mean, that's my problem with with going back is.
The question was asked.
Yeah, and I think it just drags this out essentially, and so. That's why, and we should just vote, I agree, but that's why I'm going to vote against it.
But is that the correct?
That was the amended motion, Representative Pickett. You're correct.
And so the cities wouldn't change, though. The information that was presented, now if the TPAC reaches back to the
Correct.
city,
Correct.
there's no new information from the city.
Correct.
So if there's no new information, you're going to still be...
Correct.
Well, but you said there's,
Correct.
but you said there's no new information.
Correct.
If there's no new information from the city, you're going to come back as not recommended again.
I think she wants to leave the scoring the same, just asking, can you meet this date, yes or no?
Correct, because we were not allowed to clarify the lead date, as Socorro was not allowed, UTEP was not allowed, City of El Paso was not allowed to clarify the lead date. So that's the amended motion, is the lead.
Qualify for those points. Right, and as I understand the motion, then, there is not going to be any rescoring, no re-ranking. The only thing that the TPAC is going to be doing is going back to the 10 agencies and getting an affirmative confirmation as to when these funds can be obligated.
But that would change the recommendation.
Well,
if they
it may,
go back.
depending on what the
Right.
agency's saying, that's right.
Because if the let date is 2015, then they will be considered, and the scoring will be the scoring.
But it has to be information that can be verified. You can't just turn around and say, because this is the problem that's been in the
Yes.
past, can you let it by June or July? And the answer is always yes.
We include.
So it's got to be something that is proven to be able to make that determination.
You're absolutely
by
correct.
TPAC.
Great.
Mr. Doolittle.
Just one question. It's just kind of difficult for us because we don't really have a dog in the fight. But looking at what Roger submitted or discussed, talking about the process, they have a column up there, column N, project design and preparation of construction package. And if you'll notice, the ones at the bottom show a January 2016, April 2016. Where did those dates come from? Because we as a department, that's what we would utilize to determine whether it's ready for fiscal year 14-15. Where did those dates specifically come from? Those were on the application.
And Trent, that's to my point of, why are we doing this when we have the information? And I do think things need to change going forward, but we have a TPAC recommendation based on...
The application process.
But it goes back to project readiness being subjective. They consider project readiness to be let date.
But if that date
Is on
was
your-
in
And
the
it's on-
package...
It's on different areas in the application. It's not, again, and I go back, out of 6 agencies that submitted, 3 were uncertain about that. That means half of them were uncertain about that was the lead date.
I'm clarifying.
Okay. Well, there's a motion and a second on that.
Call a question.
Call the question. And then I guess this would be a roll call vote as well.
It included the friendly amendment?
The motion is,
And it's the amendment that Representative Pickett.
okay, your original amended motion was to rank according to the scoring provided, adding the physical let year 2015. Is that
The
correct?
amended motion is to go back to the entity and ask and clarify and I guess prove, Representative Pickett, that the entity can let the date in federal year 2015.
Okay, so the amended motion is to ask each entity to confirm that their project is ready to let in fiscal year 2015.
Federal fiscal year.
Federal fiscal year 2015, and then base it on the scoring already done, send it back to TPAC to rescore, and then present to TPB. Is that correct?
I don't know that it needs to go back to TPAC. I think staff can do that and bring it back.
We leave the projects as is, just go back to the entities and say, can you do this or can you not? Prove us that you can and add that on. If you can do it, then go ahead and do it. But if you can't, then you're not going to be included.
I believe we said staff.
Yeah.
Send it back to staff. Staff is to reach out and then bring it back. Because the TPAC is not going to be rescoring. They're not going to be doing any of that. So it's up to
The whole process
staff.
has always been to go through TPAC. And so I think this should be before you as a recommendation from TPAC, not from the MPO staff.
Okay.
So
All
I,
right. Then I defer to our legal advice. Send it back to
So let's call the vote, please.
So it goes back to TPAC.
So the motion was done by Representative Emma Costa, seconded by Dr. No. Does Mayor Vela, how does Mayor Vela vote?
No.
Start with the chair.
Mayor Vela?
No.
Representative Nyland? Aye. Aye, yes.
Yes.
Representative No?
Yes.
Representative Acosta?
Yes.
Representative, Mr. Marquez?
Yes.
Mr. Tommy Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mr. Ernie Gaisar?
No.
Judge Escobar?
No, sorry.
Commissioner Perez?
No.
Representative Pickett?
No.
Mayor Lisa?
Yes. Aye.
Mayor Kramer?
Yes.
Mayor Reese?
Yes.
Mr. Benajek?
Yes.
Mayor Perea?
No.
Mr. Doolittle?
No.
Mr. Veeder?
No.
And Mayor Pro Tem Diana Marie.
No.
Motion fails.
Is that, I think she's going to say.
I have 10 no and 9 yes.
Motion failed. Judge Escobar.
So I'd like to make a motion to do two things: to approve the TPAC recommendations and to ask the TPAC to review the process and bring back and utilize a more clear process where my recommendation would be if they're not ready to let, they get kicked out of the process.
Judge, would you consider a friendly amendment on that to go back to Representative Pickett's direction that, given the fact that all 10 of these projects are good projects and would show great value to this region, that we could direct staff to work with potential funding sources to identify, to make all of these projects essentially over the course of this next year funded?
Could I clarify that just a little more?
Sure.
And I know that we got FHWA on the phone here. We wouldn't have a call next year if we use next year's funds, but we have the ability to use next year's funds now if other projects are ready. So if you would amend your motion to include of the projects who didn't make 2015, that we also include, I guess you'd call backup, but we have $1.14 million available to us now. We have a commitment from TxDOT because of cash flow. They know there are going to be projects that aren't going to be ready to let. So they've said that's your money banked away. You can use it now if you can prove you have projects available. So of these 6, there's at least a couple of them that could go forward if they can prove that they're ready to go. So I would like us to go ahead and re-rank the projects that didn't make this and make the 1.14 million available to them.
Here's my only concern with that. I do think it should go back through TPAC
Yes.
because that's the process that we
Yes.
utilize, and that it can be a recommendation to TPAC, but it really should come from the process up, I think.
That's what I'd like to come back, because we could come back in December with a recommendation from TPAC. This is like, just think of it this way. All of a sudden, you're told you have an additional 1.14. We've already made recommendations. So we've got projects here that they say are ready to go. So there's no reason why we shouldn't go back now and say, TPAC, there's an additional 1.14 million available. Give us your recommendation on that 1.14 by December, because if they really are ready to go, let's get them out.
Would you mind if we did it in two motions, just so it's clear, the two different funding cycles? But I support that. So the first motion is then to approve the TPAC recommendations and to ask TPAC or staff to come up with a clearer process. So that's my motion.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
And then the second motion, Representative, would you like to make it?
Yeah, I would make a motion that 1.14 million of fiscal year 2016 TAP funds be made available per TxDOT's recommendation, and that TPAC from the projects that didn't make the first round be recommended out of that 1.14.
I second.
Okay. Yes. Mr. Doolittle.
I just have a question. Knowing how entities sometimes work, they typically plan their match and their construction season and their design season by fiscal year. So if we're already working on allocating fiscal year 16 funding, is there any concerns from the entities that they had planned in fiscal year 16 to submit an application that they are no longer part of this competitive process because we're already allocating 16 money?
Trent, we couldn't get anybody to apply for the 2015 at the beginning, and now that we went out and sold everybody on it, we had an abundance.
Okay.
And it's not near as much money as that we've had available, because it was really a 3-year pot of money. And so 1.14 is all that's pretty much determined that's going to be available for 2016. And instead of letting projects that we heard today that are ready, why wait another year if they're ready and we're not going to have 3.9 million available? So let's get them out the door.
Okay. I mean, one of the things that Mike mentioned was a separate call for projects. And so I just want to make sure, I agree, I just think there's some clarification on my part that I need to know before.
Mr. Beeler.
I saw the numbers and the dates up here that project plan sets were going to be complete. And frankly, if you tell me that you're going to get them done this year, I don't believe it. Not even close. What I'd rather see us do, as a suggestion, rather than have a separate project call for fiscal year 16, to go ahead and program the projects that rank high for 16 and get rid of the separate call. Because very frankly, I don't believe if you tell me that you're going to have a set of plans ready in April of 2016, that you're going to come back and tell me you're going to do it in 2015.
And Bob, I believe you 100%. I know what you know. The projects that we're approving aren't going to be ready. I also know that if we don't have approval of other ones to slip in their place, we are going to push it down the road. And I think because of what's happened today, we need to say, I told you so, come June or July of next year. I think we need to finish this out. In other words, there's a method to this madness. I think by June and July of next year, we can all go back and say, you promised, remember, you said, because we haven't done it enough. So this whole idea is to go ahead and get all these hook, line, and sinker, because I believe some of the ones that we just approved today aren't going to make it. If we don't have other ones in the process that can be substituted, we do stand a chance of losing the money.
Exactly. Can we go to where you lose 2 if you don't make the 1?
I would love that, but so I would still make the motion, though, that we use the 2016 dollars and have TPAC rank the remaining projects to utilize those, because not only does it get us further in doing all of the projects, but with the case that you and I believe that ones that are being approved today won't be ready, we won't lose that money because we'll have other projects ready to go.
I still second.
And just for clarification, is this for another call of projects or just?
No, it's to use 2016 TAP dollars for the remaining projects that didn't make the first round.
And I guess to Bob's point that they be ranked, I guess, in order of readiness, was that?
I think we now have a basis. I think the motion, the first motion set the state. We already have that, I think, in place.
Call the question, Chairman.
There's a motion and a second on the floor. All,
Yes.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Let's take a 3 to 5 minute break, recess, and come back. All right. Now that we're done with that one item.
Move to reconsider.
Can you tell us the motion again?
Some members have to leave, so let's move item number 7 up. I mean number 6 up, please.
Six. Because this is a fast one. No controversy on this one, so. Right, Chairman?
Sir.
I said no controversy, that's what.
Yeah, right. Okay, who's presenting on this?
I'm going to start. I know Michael's going to take a part of it, but the Exec Committee met on Wednesday?
Monday, sir.
Monday, I'm sorry. I know there's 8 days to the week, and I get them confused every so often. But we met on Monday, and, it was, there was 6 members. The vote was recommended, it was 5-1. But I still, and I told, we made some recommendations, and I'll go through them first, and then we'll talk about it. It was voted to remove Fort Bliss as a voting member. It was voted 5-1 to go to 16 members. Again, also, the quorum would be 9. 3 misses, regardless, there is no excuses. Any 3 misses, you will lose your voting privileges for 12 months or 1 year.
The executive committee or
The TPAC.
Oh, TPAC.
Right. And the only thing, and I think we didn't talk about it, and like I said, yes, sir?
Just as clarification, you say and it really doesn't matter which way we go, I just want to be clarified. You said you lose your voting privileges for a year, or is that for the calendar year?
It
12
is a
months.
calendar
I
year.
understood it for the calendar year.
Calendar year.
Right.
So that you start all over in January.
So if your third one's in December, you miss nothing.
So there's no.
So it's based on the calendar.
So the entity, so the entity doesn't have the ability to reappoint.
No.
So if their appointee does not show up, that entity loses the rest of that calendar year.
So we recommend if they have 2 absences and they're not going to start coming in, they may need to switch and get somebody that wants to show up. And also, no proxy votes. We did vote that there will be no proxy votes. I didn't recommend it, and I'm one of the guys one of the guys said that the only one that didn't recommend it. But and also, and I'm not sure if we can reconsider, and maybe you can help me. I didn't pay attention, and I didn't realize that we don't have the PSB on here. The PSB is not a voting member of the TPAC all of a sudden.
I guess, sir, as it stands right now, the Public Service Board is a standing member, but if this recommendation that has gone through TPAC and the Executive Committee goes through, the PSB would not have a standing vote.
And can I ask why that was recommended?
Sir, that's the motion that came before TPAC.
I know, but I'm sure there had to be a reason behind it. I'm just wondering, the PSB is such a large part of the city, county. I mean, it's a big part of everything. I'm just kind of real concerned that we kind of said that PSB had no voice in it.
Again, sir, the ultimate decision is left to this body.
And my biggest concern, and the reason why I did not vote for it, is we didn't really address the real problem. And I said this last week or last month, and I said it on Monday, and I'm going to say it one more time today. that we didn't really address the problem. You know, we said, okay, we have, the reason we think that there's been some fixing and people are not showing up and they're fixing the quorum, so is that the real problem? I don't believe it's a real problem, because we did look at the voting, and it wasn't the city that wasn't showing up. And I know you told me it's a little bit tough to look at actual attendances because of proxy votes. But I think that we're trying to, now, what we're trying to do by lowering the 16 is really try to manipulate something that may be broken. But if it's broken, why don't we look at the reason why it's broken, and why don't we really make the right assessments to fix it? And I know we made some great recommendations on the executive committee of, you know, the absentees and no proxy vote to really make sure that people start showing up. But I was very disappointed that we're going to lower the number just because we felt that, I mean, point blank, that the city was manipulating the program and the city was doing a lot of things that, so instead of figuring out what it was, that really, because the city was the one showing up, I'm really confused for the reasoning, to be honest with you. And anyway, so that was the recommendation of the, and we're passing out, as you can see, a attendance record, and you'll see the city did show up, so really, and that was the reasoning behind, so that really, I think, was not the proper move. Mr. Costa? I'm sorry. I mean, I'm sorry, I apologize.
Mr. Doolittle.
And I just want to clarify something. We talked about 3 cumulative absences in a calendar year. The discussion that we had at executive committee is it was 3 regularly scheduled meetings. Because one of the things that I brought up is Mr. Love has been my proxy. I'm going to appoint him permanently to TPAC. But ultimately, because we sit on 2 MPO policy boards and TPACs, if they reschedule that regular meeting, it's going to be difficult for us to adjust our schedules.
And I thank you for that, because you're right. So we did do a 1-year schedule of the meetings, so that would be on schedule. Now, if we do change the schedule meeting, and then they had already committed to coming, and we changed it, that would not count as a, that would be an absence because we changed the meeting.
Correct.
But we did do a 1-year schedule also for the meeting.
To the chair, if I may, I was under the impression that the reason for the changing of the membership of the TPAC was that the Federal Highway Administration was concerned about quorum issues. And I don't know if the Federal Highway Administration is still online, but that was my understanding, that they were concerned during the audit that the TPAC had quorum issues. Am I correct, Mr. Medina?
During the federal certification review, there were comments and concerns by the FHWA. Again, I have not received the official 2014 federal certification review. But again, if Ms. Bales is on the line, she can attest or respond.
I don't know, is she on the line? She probably isn't on the line. Okay, that was.
I'm here.
Oh, okay. So,
I'm not hearing everything. There's a lot of feedback.
We have the same problem here.
What the question is that we believe that the reasoning for downsizing the TPAC committee is because the Federal Highway Administration had concerns about the Transportation Policy Advisory Committee not meeting quorum. Is that correct?
We did have some concerns about the TPAC committee not meeting quorum.
And so that, go ahead.
We're having a meeting and canceling at the last minute.
Okay. And Mr. Medina, you canceled because you didn't have a quorum, or?
Essentially, we didn't have a quorum for whatever reason.
How many times didn't you not have a quorum? I'm sorry.
I think in the early part of the month, I think it was maybe in January, I just can't remember. But I think ultimately there was maybe 3. I just can't, for the calendar year. Yeah, 3.
Mr. Chair, looking at the list, there's 3 that they were canceled, and if you'll also notice, there was 1 rescheduled from July 16th for whatever reason.
Okay. Mr. Gonzalez?
At the EC meeting that we had, the mayor did bring up that question, and it was explained to him that the other members of the TPAC board are smaller communities, have smaller staff. Specifically brought up that, if we schedule a meeting for the 3rd Wednesday of the month, everybody makes an effort to show up to that meeting. Now, if we make an effort and for whatever reason, we don't get quorum, then that meeting has to be rescheduled. Well, it's not as easy for us to do that. We have to reshuffle, we have to make sure that our schedule are available, so that was one of the reasons, is we wanted the consistency of having the ability to have those meetings, and Trent brought up a good point at that, he sits on two boards, and if he's scheduled to come out here and they said, no, we're not gonna have this meeting, we're gonna have it next week, well, he may have a board meeting up in New Mexico someplace, and so that was the reason why we wanted the quorum, reduce the numbers of the quorum so that we could have it. It was also brought up about how we're gonna be able to get the people there. Well, that's up to each entity. If the county, whoever the county so chooses to put in that position, we're gonna make sure that that person's there all the time. I mean, come hell or high water, that person's gonna be there. And that's the thing, the same way with the other members. I think, Mayor, Little, am I right on that, or which is Karen?
No, absolutely. I think that was a big concern for the small municipalities, but we don't have a lot of staff to assign to these particular organizations or extra organizations, so we have to participate in. So I echo much of what Mr. Ramos.
And to the chair, if I may again, and I spent a lot of time listening to audio. But in listening to the audio, what I heard on the audio was that the TPAC committee had become very political, and so you wanted to make it apolitical. And so my concern is the following, that we have members, and obviously I understand the small cities, but that we have members that sit on this Transportation Policy Board and also sit on the Transportation Policy Advisory Committee. And so that's a concern to me. Because they're voting as an advisory committee, and then they're voting again as a member of this board. But then if you look into the process, again, there is no criteria as to who needs to sit on the technical advisory committee, because it's a technical advisory committee. So I don't know if the executive committee should go back and review and say, it's a technical committee, technical people should be there. And the small cities can assign either a member of their community or assign somebody to be at those meetings that is not the actual, say, elected official that also sits on this board. And so, if it's another elected official that doesn't sit on the board, maybe that's another criteria. But I think there's no process and there's nothing that says who should be on that board, who shouldn't be on that board. So I had a concern over that. I also had a concern because, and I brought it up to the chair, was that these meetings are not videotaped, these meetings are not available online either. And I believe the chair will bring up an item next month as to how much that would cost. I did speak to the Public Service Board, to Mr. Alan Schubert, who is now the Vice President of Operations, and he also stated that he would like his agency to sit on the TPAC. They are kind of related to the city, but not really. They have their own board. They are a separate corporation of the city. And because they do so much construction and so much more is coming up, that they would like to see what projects are coming up and be able to mirror those two together, their operation with whatever's going on with the entire city and some of the county. So those are my concerns to the chair. And I would like to include the Public Service Board to be a part of that TPAC committee, simply because they have so much infrastructure coming up, and I think you've heard it on television, and, there's projects that go into the county as well. And so we need to make sure that they're aligned, the projects are aligned with any transportation projects that may be coming up.
Just to clarify some things for Representative Acosta, it is a technical committee. It is a committee that makes the recommendations to the board, and it's ultimately up to the board to decide whether they'll accept it or not. And we just lived through one of the recommendations from the TPAC. Now, the TPAC has come up with a criteria or a grading system, Mr. Medina, am I right, to rank the projects. They are going to go ahead and rank the projects, make their recommendations based upon the sheet that they're having, that they prepared. And I believe they just finished that sheet, or they're in the process of it, how to rank the projects?
The project selection?
Yes.
Right. So the policy board, I believe, back in May,
had adopted the project selection process. And the idea now is that when we move forward in selecting projects is that it is a requirement that a two-tier system is introduced into the selection and the recommendation of the projects. The first tier is based on national goals and the components of the CMP. And then from there, that's at the MTP level, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. The second component is that when the project is ready to go into the TIP, and so it becomes a functionality of project readiness, where there's an assessment of that project, and initially it's a scheduling. So, yes, sir, so back to the point is that as we move forward, is that the functionality of the TPAC to make a sound recommendation to this policy board is based on that criteria.
And by limiting the number, it'll give us a true telling of which projects are ready and which ones are not. And they're not there to say, okay, you know, the county has more voice than the city. They said this, we have the sheets here. We've done the analysis of everything. It's a fair and it's going to be a tested way that we do it. So they look at it, they come back, the TPAC makes a recommendation, it comes back to the TPB board, and it's up to us to do our homework and say, yes, we agree with this, or no, we don't agree with it.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Commissioner Bettis, thank you for recognizing me. The chairman, I think, has made some points to me that make a lot of sense. I think he's showing kind of the way of how we do need to have this committee become more technically oriented, and I agree with that. So that's why I support Ms. Acosta's points about how people that are on this committee should be technical, whether they be engineers, planners. The PSB is a good example. The other example would be the electric company. I mean, there's a lot of projects that happen that impact TxDOT, impact the city, impact the county. I think somebody from that group should be on this committee. And I think that all entities who are represented should send someone who's an engineer or who is a planner or who's got some skill set relative to the technical aspects of the review. Because I do think that it should be technically oriented and it should be focused on the merit of the project. And I think it would meet everyone's objectives in here. I mean, it would meet TxDOT's points of them saying that's not ready, it's not going to get funded. The representative's point about, well, we're going to show them 6 months down the road how they didn't get something done. Whoever that entity is, it'll meet his objectives, it'll meet the streamlining objective, and it would meet the objective of taking the politics out of that review process. And I think then we would all be doing it in deed and not just word. And then it still becomes or stays political, because when you proportionalize the numbers, then you're going to have political entities or a politician representing their entity there, and the numbers will be greater because the numbers will be less on the administrative side that you're reducing.
Mayor Miller.
I need to speak in support of the recommended changes because for these issues. And we talk a lot about quorum and this and that and everything else, but my approval is a little more basic in that this was an organic suggestion from the committee itself to improve. In talking to Mike and to various members, they understood they had some deficiencies and some inabilities to make the decisions when they needed to in a timely fashion. And so I think we should applaud them for being very introspective and looking at their performance and bringing these suggestions to us and to make them a more successful committee. I must speak to your point about all of the members being technical, and we do provide what we can, but there are members of this committee that have less resources than some, and we still have a voice. But I'm supporting this not so much from a quorum position, but the fact that this is an organic movement from the committee itself to fix itself. And I can't see why we cannot support that for the committee to make themselves better. So.
And Mayor, I agree with you. And the other reason why I'm supportive of this is because the change would basically, as far as I understand, make it so that every entity has one vote. And it's a technical process that judges and evaluates each project based on the technical aspects of it and whether they meet the criteria, instead of a weighted body where, you know, maybe one entity has more votes than the other. It just becomes completely equitable 100% across the board in that every entity has one voice. And I think that's good for a technical committee, because if that's its purpose and that's what its purpose has been, then I can't argue against that either. So I also support it.
So remember, this actually came out, we used to have two committees. And some of the people on one were on the other, and there was a problem with both of those. And so this actually grew from combining part of those. And it sounds like there's some consternation, you know, the missing the meeting should be there. But I want to remind this body, we reduced the quorum here many years ago because we couldn't get enough people. I don't think we've ever had that problem, or haven't had that problem for years and years and years now. Some of the entities on here, you know, and I know that you put out a list of those who weren't there. There's some of those communities don't feel that they have anything to offer, and just by sheer fact that the bylaws have them as a member, maybe we should go back to trying to figure out if there's representation from the cities in the outside the city of El Paso, and they among themselves choose a representative, and maybe it rotates. But the problem with quorum has been, you've got some, again, City, Clint, Anthony, New Mexico, unless they've got an issue before the body, they don't seem to want to, I don't blame them. So if you're going to reduce the membership, maybe just, I don't know that we're ready to bake this bread. Maybe you just adopt the losing voting privileges at this point. And then coming back with something that's a little bit more substantive, because having PSB or having the electric company, that was actually part of another committee some time ago. Mike, didn't we have that? What were the two committees that we had?
I think it was the Project Selection Committee and then the Technical Advisory.
Because the Technical Advisory Committee really was the engineers. It was the engineers that were making recommendations and then going to the Project Selection Committee. And I even know this came from the entity themselves. What's a better fix than just doing this today like this?
Well, I guess let me state this.
Because if we adopted this, it would be back when?
If this passes.
Only because there was a motion earlier that goes back to a TPAC, and we're not sure what TPAC it's going to go back to.
No, if this passes, if you all look at item C, is that we would commence a 10-day public comment period. After that, it would become effective. So after this, we would require that member agency to send a communication to the MPO describing who would be sitting on that technical committee.
Because I don't want to go back and redo everything, but I mean, there should be an opportunity to ask them if they want to be on the board instead of just by virtue of the bylaws. The bylaws should allow it. If you don't, then the quorum is reduced by that amount. But I bet if you ask some of these entities, do you want to be on TPAC? Some of them come back and say, I don't see the need to do that.
Mr. Doolittle.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple of comments. I support Mayor Miller's comments, at least tied to the TPAC. This is something that they presented to us. They felt it was a fix that they needed. The other comment that we discussed at Executive Committee is, although we are reducing the number of voting members, none of the participants that are on the TPAC right now will be uninvited from participating. So the number of chairs around the table will be the same. So although Fort Bliss will no longer be a voting member, they will continue to participate at the table as in a technical advisory capacity, just not in a voting capacity. So I just want to make that point clear that we'll still have technical expertise. It's just the number of votes will be reduced. So I support Mayor Miller's comments that this is a self-imposed, I guess, corrective measure from the TPAC, and I support that.
Mayor Leeser.
Yeah, You know, if you look at this handout that we gave with the absentees, if we did do the 3 times with no excuses, you'd have 8 members that would not, they would lose their privileges for 12 months, for the 12-month calendar. And out of those 8, 7 of them are still part of the 16. So if you're really trying to correct the problem and you're really working on a quorum, you did a really, really bad job. Because, like I said, 8 out of the 7 are the ones that have not made it, or have lost at least 3. So, you know, that's why that's why I go back to my first statement. I don't think we really identified the problem. And by doing this, we didn't really fix it, because again, there's 8 people, or 7 out of the 16 would lose their voting privileges, so then you wouldn't have a quorum. So really, I think we made the problem worse because people aren't showing up.
Mayor, who wanted to speak? Yes, sir.
Sure. To the comment from Mr. Doolittle, it said that everybody that is on the TPAC will still be there on the TPAC. You know, if you reduce the number of voting members for the city of El Paso, there are some people that will not be participating anymore. So, you know, right now we have 3 people that are participating. You reduce it to 1 vote, then there's 2 people that will no longer be there. And those people have an excellent record of attendance and participating on the meetings.
Mr. Chair.
I also noticed that, you know, one of the ones that was canceled on the, you know, the January 15 meeting is a special meeting. So it goes back to when you call for special meetings on TPAC, you know, sometimes you don't make quorum because it's a special meeting and it moves back and forth, and not everybody can make it. You know, there's previous commitments, there's people that are not able to attend, so that has to be adjusted. Just wanted to make sure that everybody noticed that.
If I can just clarify, what I mean by participate is, you're correct, is there are three members from the city of El Paso. The invitation to participate in TPAC is still there. We still recognize the technical knowledge that they bring to that committee. It's just the voting. So the DOT is the same way. We have 2 that currently vote. I don't anticipate that Ms. Herrera won't attend. You know, she'll bring that knowledge and that expertise to the committee. She just will no longer have a voting right on the revised TPAC.
And if I may add to that, you know, as a response, if you are not participating day in and day out on the TPAC, you know, if you only come in, you know, once in a while, you lose a lot of the information and you don't carry, you know, the information that you need to make an informed decision when you come in. So it's, you know, you can do that. You can be here 1 month and then 3 months later come in and say, oh, by the way, let me offer you some advice. It's difficult to do.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add one aspect of it, and that is, if PTAC is actually a technical committee, you've actually lowered the technical staff on that, or the technical votes on that committee. It doesn't make sense if you realize that we want technical expertise, but you've actually lowered the members on that committee from the technical aspect of it. And it seems counterproductive.
Well, and I guess my response to that would be that, you know, TPAC is a subcommittee, advisory committee to this organization, to the TPB. You know, when we have a weighted system on a technical committee, just like we have here at TPB, you know, that opens up the door for there to be either factions or other things that distract from the technical nature of the committee. The focus should be on providing that technical guidance to the TPB, and then the politics of it are left up to here. But I think when you have a weighted system that mirrors the TPB, you have, you know, a possibility for that to occur.
And we're agreeing with you, and we're saying make it technical. And right now, it's not being made technical; it's being made less technical. I couldn't agree with you more, Chairman. I think you're exactly right. But what the actions that are taking place right now is not accomplishing your objective.
I think it's being less technical from the city perspective, because you're going to get fewer technical seats on it. And the only reason it might be less literally technical is because of the resource issue for the municipalities.
No, I think he was basing it on the aggregate. I don't think he was basing it on us. You're basing it on the
Right.
total?
Correct. On the total, if you look at what's on the board now or on the committee now as it was before, you've actually reduced technical expertise out and left the political aspect.
And to y'all's point, Judge and Chairman, I think you're right. It should be technical, but this is not making it more technical. You're making it less technical, as Jay has pointed out, and you're saying it's a vote. It shouldn't be a vote. It should be a recommendation, and it's not. It's exactly still the same thing with other entities having less votes. Y'all can see it as sour grapes from the city, and it's not. You're not making it more technical. By definition, in the aggregate, you're reducing the technical expertise on that committee.
Who are the members, the 16 voting members? What would that, in terms of the recommendation? And then I have a follow-up question after this. So, okay. So the voting members would be, the town of Anthony would have one, the city of El Paso would have one, the Mass Transit, which is also the city, so they would actually have two. The Clint would have one, Horizon would have one, Socorro would have one, Vinton would have one, Sunelli would have one, the county would have one, TxDOT would have one, Isleta would have one, UTEP would have one, and New Mexico, each one of those jurisdictions would have one. Just to piggyback off of Mayor Miller's comment and Mr. Doolittle's comment, it did come from within the organization itself, the body. And last month, when we weren't comfortable with it, and I wasn't comfortable with moving forward, we all agreed we were going to kick it back to the executive committee, which is our body that vets these issues. The executive committee affirmed the recommendation and is now, we have now two policy bodies recommending to us the same thing. And so I support that work, and I support the recommendation, and I'd make a motion to adopt.
And I think that the only exception I would make to that is that it's not organic. I think it's based on bad actors, and it's not based on process. This is not process-driven.
How is it based on bad actors? That's a pretty...
Well, not anybody here.
Okay.
It was based on the fact that Mr. Medina told me that he was threatened a couple of times of a quorum not being made and people not being sent. That's what I mean. And I said that in previous
Okay.
meetings.
But we
And
have
so-
the executive
so that-
committee
so
vetted
that's
for us,
So that's
too.
my point.
Okay.
My point is, it's not based on process. It's based on a bad actor or actors on that premise, on that point that I just made. That's what it's being based on. And I think on just the aggregate and just the math, the technical expertise, and the objective, which the objective, as I've heard it, unless it's different, is that you want to make this more technical. You're not doing that. You're not doing that. So the objective's not being obtained.
Mayor Miller, and then I'm going to call the vote because some members have to leave. And then Mr. Doolittle, then we'll have to.
To the chair before, I think you had Lieutenant Governor Issa in the room. I don't know if he left. I just wanted to recognize him.
Oh,
he left.
Lieutenant Governor, thank you for being here today. We appreciate it. Mayor Miller?
Me. Mayor Lisa, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor Lee.
That's Mayor Lee.
I was wondering when that got
Or when the annexation process went.
No, Mr. Medina, the question I brought up was reducing the members that show up. And I just want an answer really from the question I asked, because it wasn't really answered. We're reducing the members that show up, and really, based on your statement, that you said you had a really hard time making quorum, so taking away the people that show up, and then if we go by the three, which we agreed on, if we go by the three, you're going to lose 8 members, or 7, because one of them, it's not going to be on there. You're going to lose 7 out of the 8 that don't come. Where's that helping what you thought was the problem?
Well, sir, I think in terms of how it stands right now is that TPAC is not held accountable for its absences. So sure, you could attest that as we move forward, the new information that becomes available or the new condition is that TPAC members are assigned a prescribed amount of absences. And so back to the comment is that back then, if you will, it was a wild, wild west. So if they showed up great. But there was no way for the MPO to come in through the mechanisms that were provided by the policy board through the bylaws on how to enforce that.
Okay, so you said they're not held accountable. Is that in attendance or in the other part of the organization? Because that's what I'm saying. Are we actually fixing the problem, or are we just talking about one thing? And I mean, it kind of made me a little nervous when you said they've never been held accountable.
Well, I'm sorry, if you're expanding the question.
Yeah, I
the
am.
answer
That's
is
why I'm
yes.
saying that. Because you said that, and I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I would tell you yes, is that, remember, the functionality of the MPO is to ensure that there's a planning process. And second of all, is that it's also the responsibility of the policy board to ensure that planning documents like the MTP and the TIP and others are provided in a timely manner. Also with that is that the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration, along with the state DOTs, come in and do a audit. So, sir, I can prescribe to you.
No, that's what I'm saying. So the correct answer is they are held accountable. So that wasn't a correct thing, they weren't held accountable. You do have a structure, and you do have rules, and they do have a great need to be there, so they are held accountable.
Well, they should be held accountable far more aggressively now.
Okay, so
What's
now
the
I'm getting
current-
confused
well,
now.
just, if I don't show up to TPAC now, what happens to me? Anything?
Right now, nothing.
That's, okay.
Nothing.
Mr. Doolittle?
Mr. Chair, I believe there was a motion and a second, but I would just offer a friendly amendment. I don't know if we're going to vote on these separately, A, B, and C, but C calls for this to be, to end November 17th, being effective November 19th. It's my understanding there's only one TPAC meeting left this calendar year, so I would offer the friendly amendment to the motion to make this effective January 1st, which would effectively fall in place with our 3 cumulative absences as well. I don't know procedure-wise how that works, but I would offer that as a...
I'd accept that.
As an amendment.
Okay. All right, there's a motion and a second. And I guess would we just approve all 3?
That's my motion.
To approve all 3. Okay, there's a motion and a second to approve the recommendation from the executive committee and TPAC. All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed?
No.
Just do a roll call vote, please.
Can I have a raise of hands of who's opposing so I can know you?
Right or left hand?
Yes, the yes.
This is opposed.
Opposed.
This is opposing the vote.
Change your mind? No. You had it up for me. Were you confused? You're not listening? This is procedures.
Ted Marquez. Tommy Gonzalez. Mayor Leeser. And Mr. J. Benaja, correct? So that's 8 noes.
Count it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7.
So Nylan, Noah, Costa Marquez, Tommy, and Leeser.
How many noes? 7 noes?
So that was 7 noes.
That was 8. It's still 10. Doesn't matter.
11 yes. Is this correct?
Okay. So can you repeat the 7 noes and 11?
The 7 noes were Representative Nylan, Representative No, Representative Acosta, Ted Marquez, Tommy Gonzalez, Mayor Leeser, and Jay Benaja. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So motion passes. Okay. Some individuals have to leave.
Will we lose
now.
quorum? So I need to leave.
And Ms. Murillo needs to leave.
We are going to lose quorum?
But I don't think we have any more items.
No, actually, yes, I think one of the things that's before you as well is the MPO lease. So if we can just quickly have...
I can stay for like 15 minutes
Okay.
if we can.
Sure.
Okay, let's move to the MPO lease then. Is that the next most pertinent item?
Again, this is, I think, the 3rd round in the lease. And so before you, Mr. Sotomayor will present the following information.
I'll try to go through this pretty quick since people need to leave. As you know, we've been analyzing 5 different options for MPO's lease, which is up in April of 2015. Next slide, please. This is an aerial depicting where all 5 of those locations are. There's the existing location between Yarborough and Loma Land. There's the Sun Metro location close to Yarborough and Montana. There's an option on Edgemere and Airway, an option on Missouri, which is between Copia and Piedras, and the option downtown. Piedras and Cotton, thank you, sir. So this is the proposal, or the summary of the costs on an annual basis, averaged over the term of the 7-year lease proposals. So the initial cost will actually be lower than this, but this is just the average to show you what the cost is over the entire term that's proposed. The option downtown is an option that's cheaper than our existing space. It includes the parking, reserved parking for all of the staff members. It's an attractive option because it's got a separate conference room versus the office space, which is on the first floor. So the accessibility and everything, I think, is really great. We'll be able to use the city parking lot between Kansas and Campbell for parking for the meetings on Fridays. So I think this is the recommendation of the cities, that this is the best option to move forward with. We did finalize our cost for the Sun Metro location. So if we wanted to move at a point during the term of this lease, we could build that Sun Metro location at a cost of approximately $122,000 a year, which includes debt service, utilities, and maintenance as projected through our existing operations. So I think the numbers are pretty solid based on historical operations. We can go through each option if you guys would like, but I think we've seen all of this, so I'll address questions.
What's our rent right now?
Our rent right now is
96,000 a year.
Just a second. I think it comes out to like about $84,500 a year. So there's a 15% increase to stay in this space, and that's basically to catch up. Our rent has been flat for very many years, so that 15% increase is because they're catching up on escalations that didn't take place.
And I know people got to go real quick, but there's some, we got square footage, we have lower amounts, but total higher dollar amounts, more square footage, less square footage, so this isn't real easy for me right off the bat. You said downtown had parking for staff, but what about ease for people who come to meetings? Because, frankly, every time I go down to visit the mayor, it costs me $25. Because the meters won't. I can run my credit card.
I'll give you my
it doesn't matter.
space for $20.
Done. And the Sun Metro one, in my mind, I liked it because it's kind of a government entity. We're a government entity. And is there anywhere to pare that down? I mean, that was one of the larger square footages. It was 6,000.
There might be some efficiencies in the design that we can look at.
What's the square footage here?
The square footage here, if I remember correctly, is about 5,700.
Okay, so we don't want to go less than 6,000. So are all of them? I'm trying to look again because you have just the dollar amounts on the summary, but I got to look up each one. So Edgemere, 6,400 square feet, 65 more or less. Downtown is 48, so we're going to go downsize by 1,000 square feet.
Right, and part of that is actually a preference of the MPO to open up the layout and the design of the offices to make it a more modern, open office layout, which in recent years
So they have
proven to be more
cubicles instead of offices.
And there's a common area issue where the restrooms aren't in the leased space; they're common area bathrooms. So there's some space savings in that as well.
I think one of the things, just again to reiterate, since I did review all the submissions here, I guess with obviously Sun Metro not, but I think one thing that needs to be decided and reviewed is about the MPO having a permanent location. So again, is that the federal partners along with the state DOTs will fund our move But I would advise you that, just depending on the functionality of the contract, is that we're going to be here again in 2 or 3 years talking about this. So I would just say that if there's a need to move to a specific area, so be it. However, I would just ask that we look at a permanent location so that we don't do this again in the next 5-10 years.
What's considered a permanent location? Buying a building or is it leasing a building permanent? No? I'm
Certainly-
confused
Yes,
on
ma'am.
your
Certainly,
explanation.
I guess permanency would be that either we would have purchased or understanding that if we were to go with a member body. Is that, I guess, Soto, can you explain, just for example, if we were to move to Sun Metro, how would that work?
So Sun Metro, we're looking at a 25-plus year deal at a minimum, so 25 years to cover all the debt service that would be issued in order to construct the facility. So that would be a minimum term that the city would be looking for. Obviously, we can look at renewal options. So as far as the timeframe that's covered within this proposal, that's definitely the more longer-term solution. Obviously, take into account that it'll take a couple of years to erect that facility, so no matter what, we have to find an option for April, whenever this lease is up, if that's the determination that we want to find something that's a 25-plus year solution.
Can you help me a little bit here?
Judge Escobar?
No, go ahead.
You go ahead. Okay. So, thanks, Mayor. The 25-year deal has to be long-term because you've got to pay back a lot of money. You all know how I feel about the downtown option. I'm a big fan of option C. I think it's more central for New Mexico folks. It's a good spot. We want more people downtown. We want more activity downtown. I think there's ways to collaborate with the other jurisdictions. For example, one of the issues for Representative Acosta earlier was she's got to listen to these tapes in order to hear the meetings, whereas at the county, we could record meetings, or at the city. These committees could go next door and have their IT department record these meetings and upload them to the website. So there are opportunities, I think, with the downtown leases. And we could is there a way to work out a long-term lease with the downtown property instead of a 2-year?
The proposal that we have is actually a 7-year term, initial term, with 2 3-year renewals. So
I think that's a good.
It's not a 2 or 3 year deal. It is
Yeah.
a longer span that I think the traditional leases for the MPO have been.
So that would be my recommendation.
Can I ask-
My motion.
Can I ask, the question I had was, I'm seeing the rent. Is there any escalation of rent based on 7 years or 15 years or 25 years? And if it is, what is the escalation? And
Sure.
because I think it's important to say.
Sure,
I mean,
absolutely.
The first,
And
and
the-
then also, does this include tax? And I know if it's a city building, the city does charge based on the amount of rent. You pay tax based on a lease payment. Does this include that?
Yes, sir. These numbers include the property tax payment, which is part of the landowner's costs of operating the building. Options A and D do not include any escalations. Options B and C include escalations on the operating expense side. So we ran an analysis where we separate out the existing operating expenses, which were $4.50 for one and $5 for the other, and we grew those at 2 or 3% annually to adjust for what we expect the total cost of occupancy to be. So there are some escalations in options B and C, as well as option E for Sun Metro. We grew the operating expenses at a 2% clip to account for increasing utility costs and other things.
Are these in our backup?
I don't think that's in the PowerPoint. I have the spreadsheet, so I can make that available through the MPO, and we can attach that to the backup.
So, to the chair, none of these include the operating costs, like utilities, they do or they don't?
These
They
costs
do.
are fully inclusive, yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. I think B should be just crossed out, the bad building.
Could we postpone this till we get more members that are from the Clint, Tornillo area? Back here?
Nah.
I know where this is going.
Call the question.
All right. There's a.
And to Representative Pickett's point, if I may go back a second, For the meetings on Friday, we'll have the parking lot open to you, so hopefully you won't get any parking tickets in that parking lot.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
All right,
Double
there-
parking.
There was a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay.
So excited for the MPO.
All right, then. Okay, then very quickly, approve the minutes for the, item number 3.
Move
approve the
to
minutes.
approve.
Second. Okay, the motion second. Yeah.
There is one small typo.
Okay. In the minutes?
Yes. And it may not seem that big of a deal, but page 3, about 3/4 of the way down, we lost quorum at 10:35. Shows we regained quorum at 10:02.
It's less than 24 hours.
Just a typo.
Move to approve with that change.
Thank you, Judge.
Okay. There's a motion and a second to approve with that change. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Then I think, are we losing quorum with Judge Escobar?
Yes.
Okay.
Those are all the actions.
No, that leaves you at least. Oh,
We have now when.
Okay, then-
now we've lost quorum.
Okay. Now
We
we've
lost
lost quorum. We
quorum.
can excuse the absent members next time.
They're still here, make the motion.
Make the motion.
Move to excuse absent members.
Dr. No? Can wait one sec? We're going to vote.
Okay, move to approve second. There's a motion and a second to excuse absent members. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
I think it should be manageable.
We're okay. Dr. No? We're okay. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Please say this.
And we are,
Have a good weekend, Dr. No.
Oh, you too.
okay, so we're now quorumless, right?
Right, so we can't vote on anything.
Okay. Can,
The only one,
Reports.
okay,
There should be no dialogue between the reporter and the reportees.
okay. Okay, let's go.
Sit there and listen.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that then.
That was nice. Sit there and listen, please. Hugo Hernandez with the Paso MPO. I'm gonna go ahead and have a brief report on item number 9. This is in regards to the Proposition 1 project call. The Proposition 1 was passed, and therefore our project call still stands. And so far, we received 6 projects from the city of El Paso. Texas submitted 4 projects, and the county of El Paso submitted 1 project. Overall, the total is $106.8 million that we receive in project costs. Next thing would be to take it to November 19 TPAC for a ranking process, and therefore after that on December 5th to have a approval for TPB on January 9th. And that's all I have.
I think I'd just like to add is that we will still receive further direction or guidance from the state on these projects.
Monthly report.
Since we can't say anything, there's nobody here.
Yeah.
I think we just ought to, well,
So we
this is
just-
probably the biggest item on the agenda, but too bad.
Does the chair have a monthly report?
I don't have a monthly report, no. So the next meeting of the TPB is scheduled for, is that discussion, does that count as discussion or? Okay, it's scheduled for 9 a.m. on the 5th of December, 2014 at the MPO office.
We like it or
Okay.
not.
Yeah, right. Right. Okay, thank you all very much.